Welcome to another evening of Reddit drama while we build and explore in our Minecraft world. Tonight I'm gathering some resources as we dive into some truly wild stories of revenge and justice. Settle in and watch the sunset from our mountaintop cabin. Today's first story is about an intern who seduced a man's wife and then had the nerve to blackmail him for a partnership position. Can you imagine the absolute shamelessness it takes to not only break up someone's marriage, but then leverage that betrayal for career advancement? They basically dug their own grave and tripped right into it. What makes these stories so compelling isn't just the betrayal, but watching as the carefully laid plans of manipulators crumble around them. In today's collection, we'll see everything from workplace sabotage to family inheritance schemes, all leading to satisfying moments of reckoning. First up, let's dive into the story of a law firm protege whose ambition far exceeded his ethics. I'd been practicing law for nearly 15 years when Kyle joined our firm as a summer intern. The kid was exceptional, Harvard Law, top of his class, with recommendation letters that read like fan mail. Everyone noticed his talent immediately, especially me. As head of the litigation department, I took him under my wing, giving him substantive work that most associates wouldn't see for years. "You remind me of myself at your age," I told him after he'd drafted a brilliant motion that helped us win a case we should have lost. "Keep this up and you'll make partner before you're 35. The firm extended his internship into the fall, then offered him an associate position starting in January. I championed him every step of the way. My colleagues joked that I'd found my professional air, and honestly, they weren't wrong. Kyle was bright, hardworking, and seemed genuinely grateful for the mentorship. When our holiday party rolled around in December, I was excited to introduce him to my wife, Rachel. Rachel had heard me sing Kyle's praises for months. She taught high school English and always enjoyed meeting the young talent at the firm. The night of the party, she looked stunning in a black cocktail dress. Even after 12 years of marriage, she still took my breath away. "So this is the prodigy you won't shut up about," she said when I introduced them. They shook hands, and I noticed Kyle's eyes linger on her a moment too long. But I brushed it off. Rachel was beautiful, and Kyle was young. It meant nothing. The three of us chatted for almost an hour that night. Kyle was charming, asking Rachel thoughtful questions about her teaching career and literary interests. I remember feeling proud watching them get along so well, my professional and personal worlds harmonizing perfectly. Looking back, that's when everything started to change. In January, Rachel began mentioning Kyle in casual conversation. "Kyle recommended this amazing book," or "Kyle said there's a new exhibit at the museum." I didn't think much of it. They'd exchanged numbers at the party to share book recommendations, which seemed innocent enough. Then I noticed Rachel's schedule shifting. She started yoga classes on Tuesday and Thursday evenings. Her book club suddenly met more frequently. She'd come home later than usual, her cheeks flushed, claiming the class was really intense today. When I suggested joining her sometime, she quickly explained it was a women-only studio. One night, I woke up at 2 a.m. and found Rachel texting in the bathroom. Through the cracked door, I could see her smiling at her phone. When she came back to bed, I pretended to be asleep. The next morning, I checked her phone while she showered, something I'd never done before in our marriage. There were dozens of messages from Kay with heart emojis and inside jokes I didn't understand. When I confronted her over breakfast, she laughed it off. "That's my friend Kate from work. We're planning a surprise for the student teacher. Why were you looking at my phone anyway?" I apologized, feeling both guilty and unsatisfied with her explanation. That night, I noticed her password had changed. At work, Kyle continued to impress everyone. He worked directly with me on our biggest cases, and I introduced him to our most important clients. He stayed late whenever I did, always eager to learn and help. Sometimes he'd ask personal questions about my marriage, how Rachel and I met, how we maintained our relationship with my busy schedule. I thought he was just making conversation, or perhaps seeking relationship advice for himself. Then he started missing important meetings. He'd text at the last minute with vague excuses. Doctor's appointments, family emergencies, car trouble. Whenever these absences occurred, I'd notice Rachel was unusually difficult to reach. In February, I was scheduled to fly to Chicago for a 3-day deposition. The night before my flight, Rachel seemed distracted, almost eager for me to leave. "You should take your time there," she said, folding my shirts into my suitcase. "Don't rush back if you need to prepare for the next day." I'll be fine here with my yoga and book club. Something in her tone made my stomach twist. The next morning I kissed her goodbye and headed to the airport. I boarded the plane, found my seat, fastened my seatbelt, and then, following a gut feeling I couldn't ignore, I got up and deplaned just before they closed the door. I called the partner handling the Chicago case and told him I had a family emergency. He was understanding, said he'd handle it himself. Then I drove home and parked a block away, walked back quietly, and used my key to enter through the side door. I heard them before I saw them, laughing in our bedroom, my bedroom. The room where Rachel and I had spent countless nights planning our future, discussing children, sharing our deepest fears and greatest hopes. They didn't notice me standing in the doorway. They were too wrapped up in each other, in our bed, with the curtains wide open and the morning sunlight streaming in. It was like they wanted to be caught, like they were flaunting it. What the hell is this? My voice came out steadier than I expected. Rachel screamed, clutching the sheet to her chest. Kyle, however, didn't even flinch. He just looked at me with this calm, almost smug expression that made my blood boil. "John," he said as if we were meeting in the office kitchen, "you're supposed to be in Chicago." What happened next still haunts me. Instead of scrambling to leave or apologize, Kyle reached for his phone on the nightstand. He swiped through it casually while Rachel sobbed next to him. "Before you do anything rash," he said, "you should know I've been documenting our relationship." He turned the phone toward me, showing me intimate texts between him and Rachel going back months, photos of them together, voice messages where Rachel complained about our marriage. "There's more," he continued, his voice eerily businesslike. "Rachel told me about your offshore account in the Caymans, the one where you're hiding income from that settlement last year. She mentioned your cocaine use during law school, how you sold to classmates, and those billing irregularities from the Westmont case." My mind raced. The offshore account was legal, if aggressive tax planning. The cocaine allegations were exaggerated, but had enough truth to be damaging. The billing issues were completely fabricated, but would trigger an investigation regardless. "What do you want?" I asked, though I already knew. "The Parker Partnership opening next month. I want your recommendation. Your enthusiastic, unqualified recommendation." Rachel was crying harder now. "I'm so sorry, John. I never meant for this to happen. He manipulated everything. He kept asking questions about you, about us. I thought he admired you." "Shut up, Rachel," Kyle snapped, then composed himself and smiled at me. "You have until Monday to think it over. That's when the partnership committee meets for preliminary discussions." I walked out without another word. I drove to a hotel, checked in, and sat on the edge of the bed staring at the wall for hours. My professional life and my marriage were being held hostage by a 20-something intern I had mentored, trusted, and championed. If you've made it this far into the chaos, you're as addicted to Reddit drama as I am. Make sure to subscribe and tell me where you are watching from. Is there someone in your life you suspect might be plotting behind your back? Drop a comment below. Now, let's get back to see how this law firm nightmare unfolds. I spent the weekend in that hotel room, cycling through rage, heartbreak, and finally, determination. By Sunday evening, I had a plan. I knew Kyle was smart, but his arrogance created blind spots. He thought he had all the leverage, but 15 years of litigation had taught me never to negotiate from a position of weakness. First, I called Rachel and asked her to meet me at a coffee shop. She arrived looking terrible, eyes swollen from crying, hair unwashed. She started apologizing immediately. "Save it," I said. "I need to know everything. How it started, what you told him about me, and most importantly, what he's really after." Over the next 2 hours, Rachel painted a picture of calculated seduction. Kyle had pursued her relentlessly after the holiday party, showering her with attention and flattery. He positioned himself as someone who understood her and appreciated her intelligence in ways I supposedly didn't. He'd manipulated her insecurities about our marriage. "He asked so many questions about you," she said, wiping her eyes. "About your cases, your clients, even your passwords. I thought he admired you so much he wanted to be just like you. I was stupid." Then came the crucial information. Kyle had recorded their conversations. He'd asked leading questions about my past, trying to get her to confirm things that were either exaggerated or completely false. When she resisted, he'd edit the recordings to make it sound like she'd agreed. "He showed me what he would send to the bar association if I didn't keep seeing him," she whispered. "It's all manipulated, but it sounds real." I asked if she would be willing to document this, to testify about his manipulation and blackmail. She agreed immediately. "I'll do anything to fix this," she said. "I know I've destroyed your trust, but I can't let him destroy your career too." Next, I called my most trusted colleague at the firm, Marcus. We'd been friends since law school, and he was now managing partner. Without giving details about Rachel's involvement, I explained that Kyle was attempting to blackmail me for a partnership recommendation. Marcus was skeptical until I played him a recording of my own. I'd set my phone to record when I walked in on them, capturing Kyle's entire blackmail attempt. "Jesus Christ," Marcus muttered. "This kid has balls, I'll give him that." "I need your help," I said, "and I need absolute discretion." Marcus agreed. Together we spent Sunday night investigating Kyle's background. What we found was shocking. The prestigious internship he claimed to have had at the Justice Department never happened. The law review article he'd supposedly published? Plagiarized. And most damning of all, his Harvard transcript was forged. Kyle hadn't even graduated from law school. "This is incredible," Marcus said, staring at the evidence. "He's been practicing law without a license. That's a criminal offense in every state. And he's been giving legal advice to our clients," I added, "the malpractice exposure alone." By Monday morning, we had a complete dossier on Kyle's fabricated credentials. Marcus called an emergency meeting of the senior partners, ostensibly to discuss the upcoming partnership decisions. Kyle wasn't invited. As an associate, he wouldn't normally attend these meetings. Then I called Kyle. "I've made my decision," I told him. "I'm recommending you for partnership." "Smart choice," he replied, and I could hear the smirk in his voice. "The partners are meeting at Freewoywam today. You should be there." "Associates don't attend partnership meetings," he said, suddenly cautious. "Marcus is making an exception in your case. Given your exceptional qualifications." There was a pause. "Fine, I'll be there." The trap was set. At 3 p.m., I sat at the conference room table with the 7 other senior partners. Kyle arrived 5 minutes late, looking confident in a new suit. His smile faltered slightly when he saw the serious expressions around the table. "Kyle," Marcus began, "John has recommended you for partnership consideration. That's unprecedented for someone at your level. Before we discuss that further, we'd like to clarify a few details about your background." "Of course," Kyle said smoothly. "I'm an open book." Marcus slid a folder across the table. "Can you confirm these are your credentials? Your Harvard transcript, your Justice Department internship, your law review publication?" Kyle glanced at the documents and nodded. "Yes, those are mine." I cleared my throat. "Actually, they're not." For the next 20 minutes, we methodically dismantled Kyle's fabricated history. With each revelation, his face grew paler. When we called the Harvard registrar's office on speakerphone and confirmed he'd never graduated, he tried to interrupt. "This is all a misunderstanding." "We're not finished," I cut him off. "You should also know that we have documented evidence of your blackmail attempts, both against me personally and against the firm." At that moment, the conference room door opened, and Rachel walked in with our HR director. She looked directly at Kyle as she described his manipulation, the edited recordings, and the threats. The transformation in Kyle was remarkable. His confidence crumbled completely, replaced by desperate pleading. "This is all a setup," he stammered. "They're working together to discredit me because I found out about his illegal activities." "Enough," Marcus interrupted. "Kyle, you are terminated effective immediately. Security is waiting to escort you from the building. The firm will be reporting your unauthorized practice of law to the Bar Association and the District Attorney's Office." As security led him away, Kyle shouted threats and accusations. No one paid any attention. After the meeting, Rachel and I walked to the parking garage in silence. The immediate crisis was over, but our marriage remained in critical condition. "What happens now?" she finally asked as we reached our cars. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I need time." 2 days later, we met with a marriage counselor. Rachel spoke with raw honesty about her insecurities and poor choices. I acknowledged my workaholic tendencies and emotional unavailability. We agreed to weekly sessions. It's been 6 months now. Kyle was charged with fraud and unauthorized practice of law. He took a plea deal and avoided jail time, but will never work in the legal field again. The firm implemented stricter background checks for all new hires. As for Rachel and me, we're still in counseling. Trust rebuilds slowly, like a bone healing after a break. Some days are better than others. I'm not sure if our marriage will fully recover, but we're both committed to trying. If there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that the people who appear most brilliant can sometimes be hiding the darkest deceptions, and sometimes the ones we trust the most can hurt us in ways we never imagined possible. The thing about trust is, once it's broken, you never look at relationships the same way again. You start noticing the small inconsistencies, the tiny red flags you used to ignore. It's exhausting to live that way, which is why healing is so important, even when forgiveness seems impossible. I never wanted trouble with our homeowners association. I'm the kind of person who follows rules, keeps my lawn mowed, and minds my own business. But when you mess with my mother, my disabled 68-year-old mother who raised 3 kids by herself while battling multiple sclerosis, well, that's when I discovered just how far I'm willing to go for justice. It started when Mum came to visit for the weekend. She lives about 2 hours away, and these visits are precious to me. Her MS has gotten worse over the years, making long drives increasingly difficult for her. She has a proper disabled parking permit, hanging from her rearview mirror, the official blue placard with her photo ID and everything. When she arrived Friday evening, I directed her to park in one of the designated guest spots right in front of my townhouse. Our HOA has clear rules. Visitors can park in guest parking for up to 72 hours without any special permits. And obviously, disabled parking laws supersede any HOA regulations anyway. That's just basic legal hierarchy. "Are you sure it's okay to leave my car here all weekend?" Mom asked, always worried about causing inconvenience. "Absolutely," I assured her. "There's even a little disabled symbol painted on the spot. It's perfect." The next morning, I took Mom to her doctor's appointment. She has a specialist in our city who monitors her MS progression, which is partly why she visits regularly. I dropped her off and went to run some errands, planning to pick her up in 2 hours. When I returned to the medical center, Mom was sitting on a bench outside, looking distressed. Her face was flushed and I could tell she'd been crying. "What's wrong?" I asked, immediately concerned. "My car," she said, her voice shaking. "Someone called and said it was towed. They left a message while I was with the doctor." My stomach dropped. "That's impossible. You were legally parked in a guest spot with your disabled permit." I helped Mum into my car and called the towing company. They confirmed they had her vehicle, towed at the request of the Oak Ridge Townhomes HOA president for unauthorized parking in a resident-only zone. "But it's guest parking," I argued, "and she has a disabled permit." "Sorry, sir," the bored voice replied. "We just respond to authorized removal requests. You'll need to take it up with your HOA. The fee is $300 to release the vehicle, cash or credit card only." Mum insisted on paying the fee herself despite my objections. She's always been fiercely independent, but watching her hand over nearly half her monthly discretionary income, money she'd saved for this trip, made my blood boil. When we returned home, a bright orange violation notice was stuck to my front door. It was signed by Karen Williams, HOA president, citing allowing unauthorized vehicle parking in resident zones, with a $150 fine added to my next HOA dues. Karen Williams. Of course it was Karen. She'd been HOA president for 3 years and had a reputation for selective enforcement of rules. Some residents, coincidentally those who voted for her, seemed immune to violations, while others received constant citations for minor infractions. That evening, I pulled out my HOA covenant documents and started reading carefully. As I suspected, Section 14.3 clearly stated, guest parking is available for non-resident visitors for periods not exceeding 72 hours without special permission. And Section 14.7 explicitly mentioned, all federal and state disabled parking provisions supersede HOA parking regulations where applicable. Mum tried to downplay the situation. "It's just a misunderstanding, honey. Don't make trouble for yourself." "No, Mom, this isn't right. She can't just make up rules and target people she doesn't like." I sent a polite but firm email to Karen with the relevant sections of the HOA agreement attached, requesting that both the towing fee and the violation fine be reimbursed immediately. I also attached a photo of Mum's disabled permit and a screenshot from the Americans with Disabilities Act regarding parking accommodations. Karen's response came at 6:30 the next morning. "Your mother was parked in a resident-only spot, not guest parking. The disabled permit is irrelevant to our private property rules. Fine stands. Further discussion can be added to next month's meeting agenda. I walked outside to verify and take photos. The spot was clearly marked guest with a faded but visible disabled symbol painted on the asphalt. I also noticed a security camera mounted on the community clubhouse that pointed directly at the parking area. This lady really picked the wrong fight, I muttered to myself. The entitlement of some people is truly mind-boggling. Imagine thinking your little HOA kingdom lets you ignore federal disability laws. The parking spot literally had both guest and a wheelchair symbol painted on it. It's like she was begging for a lawsuit. Over the next few weeks, I began what can only be described as a deep dive into the operations of our HOA. I started by requesting access to financial records, which I was legally entitled to as a homeowner. Karen initially couldn't find the documents, then claimed they were being audited, but eventually relented when I mentioned getting my lawyer involved. What I found was alarming to say the least. The HOA budget showed $15,000 allocated for community landscaping improvements last year, but the actual spending was closer to $30,000 with no explanation for the overage. Interestingly, Karen's home had received extensive professional landscaping during that same period. New sod, a water feature, and elaborate stone pathways. I also discovered that violation fees had increased 340% since Karen took office, but this income wasn't properly accounted for in the budget. There were checks written to cash with only vague descriptions like event supplies or maintenance materials. While researching, I posted in our community Facebook group asking if others had experienced unfair treatment from the HOA. The floodgates opened. Dozens of neighbors shared stories of questionable fines, selective enforcement, and intimidation tactics. One neighbor, Ted, from 3 doors down, messaged me privately. Check your security cameras from 2 weeks ago. Karen was walking around the parking lot at 2 a.m. with what looked like keys in her hand. I didn't have cameras, but I remembered the one on the clubhouse. As a homeowner, I had the right to request footage for security concerns. The property management company was surprisingly helpful once I mentioned possible criminal activity. The footage was shocking. It clearly showed Karen walking through the parking lot late at night, stopping at several cars. She appeared to be scratching them with something in her hand. These were all cars belonging to residents who had publicly disagreed with her at recent meetings. Then I hit the jackpot. I found footage from the day Mom's car was towed. Karen is clearly seen examining Mom's properly displayed disabled permit, taking photos of the car and making a phone call, presumably to the towing company. The parking spot's guest marking was clearly visible in the video. I continued gathering evidence, requesting bank statements that showed Karen had been using the HOA debit card at restaurants, gas stations, and even for a weekend trip to a resort. I found invoices from the landscaping company that were addressed to Karen's personal residence but paid with HOA funds. But that wasn't even the worst part. Another neighbor shared that Karen had convinced the board to hire her brother's construction company for clubhouse renovations at nearly double the market rate. The renovation was simply a fresh coat of paint and new curtains, but the HOA had been charged for structural work that never happened. Things went from bad to unhinged when I caught her on my own security camera, which I had installed after starting this investigation, coming onto my porch at night and placing a fake violation notice claiming I was running a business from my home. Completely fabricated. And here's where it gets absurd. When confronted by text about the fake violation, Karen responded, "Maybe if you spent more time taking care of your property instead of digging into HOA business, you wouldn't get so many violations." She literally admitted to targeting me in writing. I'd compiled enough evidence to present a solid case of embezzlement, property damage, and abuse of power. I contacted the remaining HOA board members with a summary of my findings and requested an emergency meeting. Surprisingly, they agreed immediately. Turns out they'd had their own suspicions but lacked concrete evidence. The emergency meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday evening. Nearly every homeowner attended. The room was packed with people eager to see the evidence. Karen arrived late, looking confident and dismissive. "This better be important," she announced as she took her seat at the head of the table. "Some of us have actual jobs to get back to." I had prepared a professional presentation with documents, photos, and video evidence. I started with my mother's illegal towing incident, showing the video of Karen examining the disabled permit before having the car towed anyway. This is a clear violation of both HOA rules and federal disability laws, I explained. But unfortunately, it's just the tip of the iceberg. Karen tried to interrupt. This is ridiculous. You're just upset about a simple parking violation. Please let him finish, said Michael, the HOA treasurer. We agreed to hear the full presentation. I methodically went through the financial discrepancies, showing the unauthorized landscaping expenditures that matched exactly with the work done on Karen's property. I presented bank statements showing personal purchases made with HOA funds. I showed security footage of her keying cars in the parking lot. With each revelation, Karen's face grew redder. She tried various tactics, claiming the documents were fake, that I had a personal vendetta against her, that everyone was out to get her because she was the only one brave enough to enforce the rules. The breaking point came when I played the security footage of her damaging residents' cars. The room went completely silent as we watched her methodically moving from vehicle to vehicle, scratching paint with what appeared to be a key. That's not me, she sputtered, despite being clearly recognizable in the video. This is doctored footage. Is this doctored too? I asked, pulling out my phone to show her text message admitting to targeting me with violations. Several homeowners stood up, sharing their own experiences of selective enforcement and intimidation. Ted showed pictures of damage to his car that matched exactly what we'd seen in the security footage. Michael, the treasurer, looked physically ill. Karen, I trusted you with our finances. These bank statements. You've been stealing from us for years. This is a witch hunt, Karen shouted, gathering her things. You'll be hearing from my lawyer. As she stormed toward the door, Michael called out, Should we tell them about the reserve fund too, Karen? She froze. What reserve fund? Someone asked. Michael explained that our HOA was supposed to maintain a $100,000 emergency reserve fund for major repairs like roofing and infrastructure. According to the most recent bank statements, that account now held less than $6,000. That was when another board member called the police. They arrived within minutes, and after reviewing the evidence of embezzlement, particularly the misappropriation of the reserve fund, they arrested Karen on the spot. The look of shock on her face as they led her away in handcuffs is something I'll never forget. The financial investigation eventually revealed Karen had stolen over $47,000 from the HOA over 3 years. The board voted unanimously to pursue full criminal and civil charges against her. You know what they say about karma. She might take her time, but her aim is perfect. And boy, did she deliver a bullseye in this case. The aftermath was surprisingly positive for our community. A forensic audit revealed the full extent of Karen's financial misconduct, allowing us to restructure our finances properly. With better management and the recovery of stolen funds, Karen was forced to sell her home to make restitution. We were able to reduce monthly HOA fees by nearly 30%. My mother received a formal apology from the new board, along with full compensation for the towing fee and the inconvenience caused. The towing company was replaced with one that had proper verification procedures. Karen eventually accepted a plea deal to avoid a lengthy trial. She was sentenced to probation and 500 hours of community service at, and this is my favorite part, a local center for disabled services. I like to think she'll learn something about compassion and accessibility rights while she's there. As for me, I was asked to join the new HOA board to help implement proper financial controls and more transparent governance. We've since created an online portal where all homeowners can view financial statements, meeting minutes, and violation notices. We've also established a formal appeals process for violations, ensuring no single board member can target residents unfairly. The whole experience taught me that sometimes standing up against injustice isn't just about one incident. It's about exposing a pattern of abuse that affects an entire community. One towed car led to uncovering years of corruption and ultimately created positive change for everyone. And Mom, she visits more often now. She parks in the same guest spot with her disabled permit, and no one bothers her car. In fact, the new board had the disabled symbol repainted to make it more visible, along with a sign clarifying that disability laws are always respected in our community. Sometimes the smallest injustices open the door to fixing the biggest problems. Who would have thought my mother's towed car would lead to community-wide reform and a criminal conviction? But that's how justice works sometimes. It starts with someone simply refusing to be bullied. Speaking of family betrayal, imagine discovering your stepson was playing a much darker game than you ever suspected. I never thought I'd be writing this post, but I guess life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. 5 months ago, my husband of 12 years, Richard, passed away suddenly from an aneurysm. He was only 46. The grief hit me like a freight train. We'd been planning our retirement, talking about traveling the world once his son from his first marriage finished college. Speaking of his son, Tyler, he's 21 now, a junior at State University studying business. When Richard and I first got together, Tyler was just 9. His biological mother had moved across the country with a new husband, maintaining only sporadic contact. It wasn't easy stepping into that role, but over the years I thought we'd developed a solid relationship. Not quite mother-son, but definitely a loving friendship. I attended every soccer game, helped with countless school projects, and stayed up late discussing his college applications. After Richard died, Tyler seemed devastated. He took a leave of absence from school and moved back into our house, his childhood home, to help me sort through everything. I was grateful for the support. Grief had left me barely functional some days. "I'll handle Dad's paperwork," he offered one morning, as I stared blankly at a stack of medical bills. "You've got enough to worry about," I accepted gratefully. Richard had been meticulous with finances, building a substantial estate through smart investments and his executive position. We weren't ultra-wealthy, but between life insurance, retirement accounts, and property, there was enough to ensure I'd be financially secure. Richard had updated his will after our 10th anniversary, naming me as primary beneficiary and executor, with provisions for Tyler's education and a generous inheritance once he completed his degree. The first few weeks after the funeral passed in a blur. Tyler was incredibly attentive, cooking meals, fielding calls from well-wishers, even driving me to grief counseling appointments. He'd sit with me in the evenings, looking through photo albums and sharing memories of Richard. "You know," he said one night, "Dad would want us to stick together. We're still family." The first hint that something was off came about 6 weeks after Richard's death. I received a call from our family attorney, Michael, who needed my signature on some estate documents. I was surprised to get Tyler's email about changing the executorship. Michael mentioned casually. "Changing what?" I asked, confused. There was an awkward pause. "He sent documentation claiming you were too emotionally distressed to handle the estate matters. He requested temporary executorship be transferred to him while you recover." "I never agreed to that," I said, alarm bells ringing in my head. Michael backpedaled quickly. "That's why I called you directly. The request seemed unusual, especially given Richard's explicit wishes." I confronted Tyler that evening, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Hey, there seems to be some confusion about the estate executorship. Michael called today." Tyler's expression flashed with something annoyance before settling into concern. "I was just trying to take the burden off you, Jane. You've been so depressed lately. I worry about you handling all this complicated financial stuff." "I appreciate the thought," I said carefully, "but I'm the executor. That's what your dad wanted." "Of course," he said, squeezing my hand. "I just thought it would help. I won't interfere again." That night, I couldn't sleep. Something felt wrong. I got up and went to Richard's home office, where Tyler had been organizing the paperwork. The filing cabinet was meticulously arranged. Too meticulously, perhaps. Several folders were missing. Richard's laptop was gone too. The next morning, I called our financial advisor. "I'm glad you reached out," she said. "I've been trying to contact you. There have been some unusual requests regarding your accounts." My stomach dropped. "What kind of requests?" "Someone using Richard's email asked about transferring investments to new accounts. When I insisted on speaking with you directly, the request stopped." The sick feeling grew. I started making more calls to our bank, insurance company, retirement fund managers. No one reported actual money movement, but several mentioned contact from me or from Richard's email account, requesting information or changes. In each case, when the institutions insisted on proper verification, the requests were withdrawn. That afternoon, I received a call from Adult Protective Services. A case had been opened regarding potential elder abuse, me allegedly abusing Tyler. "We've received concerning evidence," the caseworker explained. "Photos of bruising, documentation of emotional abuse, and financial manipulation." I was speechless. "That's completely false," I finally managed. "Tyler is a grown man in college, not a vulnerable elder, and I've never laid a hand on him. The report claims you've been emotionally unstable since your husband's death. Violent outbursts, threats. The complainant is concerned about their safety. After the call, I sat in stunned silence. What was happening? The doorbell rang. More APS workers with police, requesting to interview Tyler privately about the allegations. While they talked to him in the living room, I slipped into his bedroom. I know it was an invasion of privacy, but something was very wrong, and I needed answers. His laptop was open on the desk. He hadn't expected me to snoop. The browser history showed searches for contesting a will, proving mental instability, and transferring property after death. His email was open too, showing correspondence with someone offering discreet documentation services. I quickly took photos with my phone before returning downstairs. Tyler was giving a performance worthy of an Oscar, voice trembling, eyes downcast. "She's been different since Dad died," he was saying. "I'm worried about her, but also, sometimes I'm scared." The officials looked at me with suspicion as they left, promising to follow up soon. The audacity of this situation was breathtaking. Here I was, grieving my husband, and now being investigated for abusing his adult son, who was actually trying to steal my inheritance. It was like living in some bizarre true crime documentary, where I couldn't quite believe the plot twist. That night, I didn't confront Tyler. Instead, I installed small security cameras in the common areas of the house, legal in my state as the homeowner. I told Tyler I was going to visit my sister for a few days to get some space and clear my head. He seemed relieved, even helping me pack. Instead of going to my sister's, I checked into a hotel nearby and monitored the camera feeds. What I saw was shocking. The moment he thought I was gone, Tyler's demeanor completely changed. The sad, supportive stepson vanished. He invited friends over, drinking my late husband's expensive scotch while laughing about how the old lady won't be a problem much longer. But that wasn't even the worst part. The cameras caught him creating evidence, pressing objects against his skin to create marks, then photographing the results. He practiced tearful faces in the mirror. Most disturbing, he put on latex gloves and went into my bathroom, emerging with prescription bottles that he carefully arranged on the kitchen table, taking photos. I also caught him making calls using a voice-altering app to impersonate me when contacting financial institutions. "Yes, this is Jane Halloway. I'd like to transfer the funds to the account my stepson has prepared." Then came the breaking point. On the second night, Tyler brought out a manila folder and showed his friends what was inside. Photos he'd doctored of me appearing to assault him, screenshots of fake abusive text messages, and a document that looked like a psychiatric evaluation stating I had become dangerous and delusional after my husband's death. The evaluation was on letterhead stolen from my grief counselor, but signed by a non-existent doctor. "Once the courts see this," he slurred to his friends, "I'll get everything. The house, the accounts, all of it. Dad always meant for it to come to me anyway. She was just a phase." I'd seen enough. I downloaded all the video evidence and went straight to my attorney the next morning. Michael was horrified by the footage. "This is criminal," he said. "Multiple crimes, actually. Attempted fraud, filing false reports, identity theft." With Michael's help, I contacted the police, our financial institutions, and adult protective services with the video evidence. I hired a private investigator who uncovered even more. Tyler had massive gambling debts. He'd lost nearly $60,000 at underground poker games and online betting sites. There were threatening texts from someone who appeared to be a loan shark. I also discovered emails to Richard's former assistant, with whom Tyler had apparently been having an affair. Their exchanges revealed they'd been planning this even before Richard's death, accelerating their timeline when he died unexpectedly. "The old man was going to change his will anyway," Tyler wrote in one message. "He was getting suspicious about us. This just speeds things up." That hit me like a punch to the gut. They'd been waiting for Richard to die. Perhaps they hadn't caused his aneurysm, but they'd been counting on his eventual death. When I returned home, I brought the police with me. Tyler's face when he saw them, and then me, behind them, was something I'll never forget. The color drained from his face so fast I thought he might pass out. "What's going on?" he stammered. "Tyler Halloway," the officer said. "We have some questions about fraudulent reports and attempted identity theft." He tried to maintain the act, claiming I was the unstable one, that I was framing him. But when they showed him still images from the security footage, he crumbled. The investigation revealed everything: the fake bruises, the impersonation attempts, the forged documents, the conspiracy with Richard's ex-assistant. the gambling debts that had driven his desperate plan. When faced with the evidence in the police station, Tyler broke down completely. "You don't understand," he sobbed. "Those people will kill me if I don't pay. Dad would have wanted me to have that money. He loved me more than her anyway." The district attorney filed multiple charges. Tyler's bail was set high enough that neither he nor his accomplices could pay it. While awaiting trial, he wrote me a letter full of excuses and blame. It was the gambling addiction, the pressure from debtors, bad influences from friends. Not once did he apologize for trying to destroy my life while I was grieving his father. The court ordered a psychological evaluation which revealed antisocial personality traits and gambling addiction. Tyler accepted a plea deal, 2 years in prison, followed by probation and mandatory counseling. The judge also issued a permanent restraining order preventing him from contacting me. As for the estate, I worked with our attorney to set up a small trust for Tyler that would pay out only for education or verified rehabilitation programs, accessible only after completing his sentence. The rest remained as Richard had intended. I couldn't bring myself to cut him off entirely. Despite everything, I knew Richard had loved his son and would have wanted him to have a chance at redemption. I sold our house, too many painful memories now, and moved closer to my sister. The loan sharks who had been threatening Tyler suddenly found themselves under federal investigation for illegal gambling operations and extortion, thanks to evidence discovered during Tyler's case. It's been a year now. I'm still grieving Richard, but the fog is lifting slowly. I volunteer at a fraud prevention program for seniors, helping others recognize the warning signs I missed. Sometimes I wonder if I could have done something differently, spotted Tyler's issues earlier, gotten him help before things spiraled. But then I remember the calculated way he created those fake bruises, practiced those tears, and plotted to have me declared incompetent while I was mourning his father. Some betrayals run too deep for simple explanations. The most painful realization wasn't the scheming or the lies. It was understanding that while I'd spent 12 years believing we were building a family together, Tyler had only ever seen me as temporary, an obstacle between him and what he believed he deserved. It makes you question every memory, every moment you thought was genuine. They say grief changes people, but I don't think that's what happened with Tyler. I think it simply revealed who he always was, just waiting for the right moment to show himself. Speaking of family betrayal, imagine discovering that a medical professional who was supposed to be caring for your loved one had a much darker agenda than anyone could have suspected. I never thought I'd be writing this post, but I guess life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. 5 months ago, my husband of 12 years, Richard, passed away suddenly from an aneurysm. He was only 46. The grief hit me like a freight train. We'd been planning our retirement, talking about traveling the world once his son from his first marriage finished college. Speaking of his son, Tyler, he's 21 now, a junior at State University studying business. When Richard and I first got together, Tyler was just 9. His biological mother had moved across the country with a new husband, maintaining only sporadic contact. It wasn't easy stepping into that role, but over the years I thought we'd developed a solid relationship. Not quite mother-son, but definitely a loving friendship. I attended every soccer game, helped with countless school projects, and stayed up late discussing his college applications. After Richard died, Tyler seemed devastated. He took a leave of absence from school and moved back into our house, his childhood home, to help me sort through everything. I was grateful for the support. Grief had left me barely functional some days. "I'll handle Dad's paperwork," he offered one morning, as I stared blankly at a stack of medical bills. "You've got enough to worry about," I accepted gratefully. Richard had been meticulous with finances, building a substantial estate through smart investments and his executive position. We weren't ultra-wealthy, but between life insurance, retirement accounts, and property, there was enough to ensure I'd be financially secure. Richard had updated his will after our 10th anniversary, naming me as primary beneficiary and executor, with provisions for Tyler's education and a generous inheritance once he completed his degree. The first few weeks after the funeral passed in a blur. Tyler was incredibly attentive, cooking meals, fielding calls from well-wishers, even driving me to grief counseling appointments. He'd sit with me in the evenings, looking through photo albums and sharing memories of Richard. "You know," he said one night, "Dad would want us to stick together. We're still family." The first hint that something was off came about 6 weeks after Richard's death. I received a call from our family attorney, Michael, who needed my signature on some estate documents. I was surprised to get Tyler's email about changing the executorship, Michael mentioned casually. Changing what? I asked, confused. There was an awkward pause. He sent documentation claiming you were too emotionally distressed to handle the estate matters. He requested temporary executorship be transferred to him while you recover. I never agreed to that, I said, alarm bells ringing in my head. Michael backpedaled quickly. That's why I called you directly. The request seemed unusual, especially given Richard's explicit wishes. I confronted Tyler that evening, trying to keep my tone neutral. Hey, there seems to be some confusion about the estate executorship. Michael called today. Tyler's expression flashed with something annoyance before settling into concern. I was just trying to take the burden off you, Jane. You've been so depressed lately. I worry about you handling all this complicated financial stuff. I appreciate the thought, I said carefully, but I'm the executor. That's what your dad wanted. Of course, he said, squeezing my hand. I just thought it would help. I won't interfere again. That night, I couldn't sleep. Something felt wrong. I got up and went to Richard's home office, where Tyler had been organizing the paperwork. The filing cabinet was meticulously arranged, too meticulously perhaps. Several folders were missing. Richard's laptop was gone too. The next morning, I called our financial advisor. I'm glad you reached out, she said. I've been trying to contact you. There have been some unusual requests regarding your accounts. My stomach dropped. What kind of requests? Someone using Richard's email asked about transferring investments to new accounts. When I insisted on speaking with you directly, the requests stopped. The sick feeling grew. I started making more calls to our bank, insurance company, retirement fund managers. No one reported actual money movement, but several mentioned contact from me or from Richard's email account, requesting information or changes. In each case, when the institutions insisted on proper verification, the requests were withdrawn. That afternoon, I received a call from Adult Protective Services. A case had been opened regarding potential elder abuse, me allegedly abusing Tyler. We've received concerning evidence, the caseworker explained. Photos of bruising, documentation of emotional abuse, and financial manipulation. I was speechless. That's completely false, I finally managed. Tyler is a grown man in college, not a vulnerable elder, and I've never laid a hand on him. The report claims you've been emotionally unstable since your husband's death. Violent outbursts, threats. The complainant is concerned about their safety. After the call, I sat in stunned silence. What was happening? The doorbell rang. More APS workers with police, requesting to interview Tyler privately about the allegations. While they talked to him in the living room, I slipped into his bedroom. I know it was an invasion of privacy, but something was very wrong, and I needed answers. His laptop was open on the desk. He hadn't expected me to snoop. The browser history showed searches for contesting a will, proving mental instability, and transferring property after death. His email was open too, showing correspondence with someone offering discreet documentation services. I quickly took photos with my phone before returning downstairs. Tyler was giving a performance worthy of an Oscar, voice trembling, eyes downcast. She's been different since Dad died, he was saying. I'm worried about her, but also, sometimes I'm scared. The officials looked at me with suspicion as they left, promising to follow up soon. The audacity of this situation was breathtaking. Here I was, grieving my husband, and now being investigated for abusing his adult son, who was actually trying to steal my inheritance. It was like living in some bizarre true crime documentary, where I couldn't quite believe the plot twist. That night, I didn't confront Tyler. Instead, I installed small security cameras in the common areas of the house, legal in my state as the homeowner. I told Tyler I was going to visit my sister for a few days to get some space and clear my head. He seemed relieved, even helping me pack. Instead of going to my sister's, I checked into a hotel nearby and monitored the camera feeds. What I saw was shocking. The moment he thought I was gone, Tyler's demeanor completely changed. The sad, supportive stepson vanished. He invited friends over, drinking my late husband's expensive scotch while laughing about how the old lady won't be a problem much longer. But that wasn't even the worst part. The cameras caught him creating evidence, pressing objects against his skin to create marks, then photographing the results. He practiced tearful faces in the mirror, Most disturbing, he put on latex gloves and went into my bathroom, emerging with prescription bottles that he carefully arranged on the kitchen table, taking photos. I also caught him making calls, using a voice-altering app to impersonate me when contacting financial institutions. Yes, this is Jane Halloway. I'd like to transfer the funds to the account my stepson has prepared. Then came the breaking point. On the second night, Tyler brought out a manila folder and showed his friends what was inside. Photos he doctored of me appearing to assault him, screenshots of fake abusive text messages, and a document that looked like a psychiatric evaluation stating I had become dangerous and delusional after my husband's death. The evaluation was on letterhead stolen from my grief counselor, but signed by a non-existent doctor. Once the court see this, he slurred to his friends, I'll get everything. The house, the accounts, all of it. Dad always meant for it to come to me anyway. She was just a phase. I'd seen enough. I downloaded all the video evidence and went straight to my attorney the next morning. Michael was horrified by the footage. This is criminal, he said. Multiple crimes, actually. Attempted fraud, filing false reports, identity theft. With Michael's help, I contacted the police, our financial institutions, and Adult Protective Services with the video evidence. I hired a private investigator who uncovered even more. Tyler had massive gambling debts. He'd lost nearly $60,000 at underground poker games and online betting sites. There were threatening texts from someone who appeared to be a loan shark. I also discovered emails to Richard's former assistant, with whom Tyler had apparently been having an affair. Their exchanges revealed they'd been planning this even before Richard's death, accelerating their timeline when he died unexpectedly. The old man was going to change his will anyway, Tyler wrote in one message. He was getting suspicious about us. This just speeds things up. That hit me like a punch to the gut. They'd been waiting for Richard to die. Perhaps they hadn't caused his aneurysm, but they'd been counting on his eventual death. When I returned home, I brought the police with me. Tyler's face when he saw them, and then me. Behind them was something I'll never forget. The color drained from his face so fast I thought he might pass out. "What's going on?" he stammered. "Tyler Halloway," the officer said. "We have some questions about fraudulent reports and attempted identity theft." He tried to maintain the act, claiming I was the unstable one, that I was framing him. But when they showed him still images from the security footage, he crumbled. The investigation revealed everything: the fake bruises, the impersonation attempts, the forged documents, the conspiracy with Richard's ex-assistant, the gambling debts that had driven his desperate plan. When faced with the evidence in the police station, Tyler broke down completely. "You don't understand," he sobbed. "Those people will kill me if I don't pay. Dad would have wanted me to have that money. He loved me more than her anyway." The district attorney filed multiple charges. Tyler's bail was set high enough that neither he nor his accomplices could pay it. While awaiting trial, he wrote me a letter full of excuses and blame. It was the gambling addiction, the pressure from debtors, bad influences from friends. Not once did he apologize for trying to destroy my life while I was grieving his father. The court ordered a psychological evaluation, which revealed antisocial personality traits and gambling addiction. Tyler accepted a plea deal, 2 years in prison, followed by probation and mandatory counseling. The judge also issued a permanent restraining order preventing him from contacting me. As for the estate, I worked with our attorney to set up a small trust for Tyler that would pay out only for education or verified rehabilitation programs, accessible only after completing his sentence. The rest remained as Richard had intended. I couldn't bring myself to cut him off entirely. Despite everything, I knew Richard had loved his son and would have wanted him to have a chance at redemption. I sold our house, too many painful memories now, and moved closer to my sister. The loan sharks who had been threatening Tyler suddenly found themselves under federal investigation for illegal gambling operations and extortion, thanks to evidence discovered during Tyler's case. It's been a year now. I'm still grieving Richard, but the fog is lifting slowly. I volunteer at a fraud prevention program for seniors, helping others recognize the warning signs I missed. Sometimes I wonder if I could have done something differently, spotted Tyler's issues earlier, gotten him help before things spiraled. But then I remember the calculated way he created those fake bruises, practiced those tears, and plotted to have me declared incompetent while I was mourning his father. Some betrayals run too deep for simple explanations. The most painful realization wasn't the scheming or the lies. It was understanding that while I'd spent 12 years believing we were building a family together, Tyler had only ever seen me as temporary, an obstacle between him and what he believed he deserved. It makes you question every memory, every moment you thought was genuine. They say grief changes people, but I don't think that's what happened with Tyler. I think it simply revealed who he always was, just waiting for the right moment to show himself. You think that family betrayal was shocking? Wait until you hear about a medical professional who used her position for a decades-old vendetta. When Mum was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer last spring, the doctors gave her 6 months. After the initial shock wore off, we decided she would live out her final days at home with hospice care rather than in a sterile hospital room. Mum had always been fiercely independent, a retired literature professor who raised me alone after my father died when I was just a toddler. The thought of her diminishing in a hospital bed seemed wrong. The hospice agency assigned us a primary nurse named Elaine who would visit daily to manage Mum's pain medications, check her vitals, and adjust her care plan as needed. From the moment Elaine walked through our door, something about her struck me as odd. She was professional enough, early 40s, soft-spoken, with dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, but there was an intensity to the way she looked at Mom, almost like recognition. "I've worked with many cancer patients," Elaine explained during her first visit, "but there's something special about your mother. I can tell she's a remarkable woman." Mum took to Elaine immediately. "She has kind eyes," Mum told me after Elaine left. "I feel like I've known her before." I chalked it up to the morphine and Mum's naturally trusting nature. She had always been an excellent judge of character, but the medication often left her confused and sentimental. Over the next few weeks, Elaine became a fixture in our home. She arrived early each morning and often stayed late, going beyond her professional duties. She'd brush Mom's thinning hair, read aloud from Mum's favorite poetry collections, and even cook occasionally, somehow knowing Mum's preference for ginger in her tea and extra garlic in her soup. "How did you know I like my tea that way?" Mum asked once. "You mentioned it," Elaine replied, though I couldn't recall such a conversation. The other hospice workers, a rotating cast of aides and relief nurses, commented on how lucky we were to have Elaine. "She rarely takes on new patients," one aide mentioned. "She must have seen something in your file that spoke to her." About a month into Mum's care, I noticed her condition declining more rapidly than expected. The oncologist had predicted a gradual progression, but Mum suddenly seemed more disoriented, sleeping almost constantly and barely eating. "It's the natural course of the disease," Elaine explained when I expressed concern. "Everyone declines differently." I wanted to believe her, needed to believe her, but something felt wrong. Mum had been lucid and relatively comfortable one day, then dramatically worse the next. When I suggested a visit to the hospital for evaluation, Elaine discouraged it. Moving her would be traumatic at this stage. Let her be comfortable in her home. One afternoon, I returned from grocery shopping earlier than expected. I had forgotten my wallet and doubled back to get it. As I walked quietly through the house, I heard Elaine in Mum's study, not in the bedroom where Mum was sleeping. Through the cracked door, I could see her rifling through Mum's desk drawers, examining financial documents. I cleared my throat and pushed the door open. "Looking for something?" Elaine didn't even flinch. "Your mother asked me to find her insurance information. She was worried about some bills." She held up a folder as if to prove her point. "I handle all of Mum's finances," I said. "She doesn't need to worry about bills." "Of course," Elaine smiled, replacing the folder. "I'll let her know everything's taken care of." That night, I mentioned the incident to Mom, who seemed confused. "Did I ask about insurance? I don't remember. Everything's so foggy lately." The next day, while cleaning out some old boxes in the attic to make room for medical equipment, I came across a photo album I hadn't seen in years. It contained pictures from before I was born, Mom in college, her early teaching days, her wedding to my father. As I flipped through the faded photographs, I froze on one image. Mom at about 20, standing on a beach, her hair long and dark, her smile wide and carefree. The resemblance was unmistakable. Mom at 20 looked eerily like Elaine. I took the photo downstairs and studied it more carefully. The similarity went beyond coincidence. The same high cheekbones, the same slightly asymmetrical smile, even the same small mole near the left eyebrow. When Mom woke from her afternoon nap, I showed her the photograph. "Mom, does Elaine remind you of anyone?" She squinted at the photo, then at me. For a moment, perfect clarity returned to her eyes. "Where did you find this?" she asked, her voice suddenly stronger. "In the old albums upstairs. Mum, why does Elaine look like you?" Mum closed her eyes. "I never thought, after all these years." She drifted off again before she could finish, the brief moment of lucidity gone. That evening, I called the hospice agency to inquire about Elaine's background. The administrator seemed reluctant to share information, but confirmed she had been with them for only 6 months, not the many years she had claimed. When I pressed further, asking about her credentials verification, the administrator promised to look into it and call me back. The next morning, Elaine arrived as usual, but I watched her more carefully. She administered Mum's medications, checking them off on the chart, but I noticed she didn't show me the pills first as the other nurses did. After she left the room, I examined the medication bottles and realized the doses didn't match what was prescribed. Mum was receiving nearly twice the recommended amount of morphine and other sedatives. Okay, hold up. This woman is literally poisoning someone's mother while pretending to be their caregiver, and somehow they haven't called the police yet? This is next-level psychopathic behavior. The patience of this storyteller is either saintly or severely misguided. That night, after Elaine left, Mom had a period of unusual clarity. I took the opportunity to ask her directly about the photograph again. "Mom, please tell me about Elaine. I think you know who she is." Mom took my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Before you were born," she began slowly, "before I met your father, I had another child, a daughter." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. What happened to her? I was 19, unmarried, still in college. My parents would have disowned me. The father wanted nothing to do with us. I gave her up for adoption. Tears rolled down Mom's hollow cheeks. It was a closed adoption. I never knew where she went, who raised her. I've thought about her every day of my life. And you think Elaine is... I couldn't even finish the sentence. Mum nodded weakly. The moment I saw her, I knew. A mother knows, but I never said anything. What right did I have after all these years? The next day, I called in sick to work and installed a small camera in Mum's bedroom, disguised in a bookshelf among her many novels. Then I told Elaine I had an important meeting and would be gone for several hours. Instead, I parked down the street and monitored the camera feed on my phone. For the first hour, everything seemed normal. Elaine checked Mum's vitals, helped her to the bathroom, and read to her for a while. Then she prepared Mum's medications. The camera caught everything. Elaine adding extra pills to Mum's regular doses, crushing them into her applesauce, then documenting completely different amounts on the medical chart. After Mum fell into a heavy sleep, Elaine returned to the study and continued going through Mum's personal papers, taking photos of financial statements and her will with her phone. Then came the moment that sent chills through my body. Elaine sat by Mum's bedside, apparently thinking Mum was deeply asleep, and began to speak. "You threw me away like I was nothing," she whispered, her professional demeanor completely gone. "Do you have any idea what my life was like? The foster homes, the abuse, while you were here in your perfect house with your perfect life and your precious son who got everything I deserved." Mum's eyes fluttered open. "I know who you are," she said softly. Elaine froze. "What?" "I've always known Meredith, since the day you walked in." "Meredith." My sister's name was Meredith. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Elaine," Meredith demanded. "I was waiting for you to tell me. I wanted it to be your choice." "My choice? That's rich coming from you. You made the only choice that mattered when you signed me away." The conversation that followed was heartbreaking. Mum explained her circumstances back then. The shame, the pressure, the lack of options for unwed mothers in that era. Meredith revealed her childhood in a series of foster homes after her adoptive parents died in a car accident when she was 8. She had searched for her birth mother for years, finally locating Mom through a DNA ancestry site. "I just wanted to know why," Meredith said. "Then I saw how well you'd done, how much you gave him while I had nothing, and I decided I deserved something from you." "So you've been overdosing me, trying to hasten my death?" Mom asked with surprising calmness. "Not to kill you," Meredith insisted, "just to keep you confused while I figured out how to secure what's mine. Your will leaves everything to him. What about me? Don't I deserve something too?" And here's where it gets absurd. Instead of being horrified that someone was deliberately over-medicating her, Mom actually seemed to understand. In what universe is the response to finding out someone's been essentially drugging you into oblivion, not immediate panic? I couldn't watch anymore. I drove home and confronted Meredith directly, phone in hand showing the video evidence. "I've called the police," I told her, though I hadn't yet. "They're on their way. Get away from my mother." The transformation in Meredith was instant and disturbing. The professional mask fell away completely, replaced by raw fury. "Your mother? She was my mother first," she shouted. "You have no idea what it's like to grow up knowing you weren't wanted, that you were thrown away like garbage while she kept you, loved you, gave you everything." Mum struggled to sit up in bed. "Meredith, please. That's not how it was." "Save it," Meredith snapped. "I don't need your explanations now. I came for what's mine, my inheritance, my birthright." "By slowly poisoning her?" I demanded. "How does that make you any better than what you think she did to you?" Something in my words seemed to reach her. Meredith looked at Mom, then at the medication chart in her hand, and something crumbled in her expression. "I wasn't trying to kill her," she said, her voice smaller. "I just needed time to make her understand, to make her fix this." The police arrived 20 minutes later. They took my statement and the video evidence. Meredith was arrested for medical fraud, elder abuse, and reckless endangerment. As they led her away, Mum wept silently in her bed. Over the next few days, with proper medication management from a new hospice nurse, Mum's conditions stabilized significantly. She wasn't cured, the cancer was still terminal, but she was more alert and comfortable than she had been in weeks. "I want to see her," Mum insisted, referring to Meredith. "After what she did to you, Mum, she could have killed you." "She's my daughter," Mum said simply, "and she's hurting. I need to make this right before I go." Against my better judgment, I helped arrange a supervised visit at the detention center where Meredith was awaiting trial. Mom insisted on going despite her weakened state, and the meeting was granted on compassionate grounds, given Mom's terminal diagnosis. I wasn't allowed in the room for their conversation, but Mom told me everything afterward. Meredith had been a nurse once, legitimately, but lost her license due to opioid addiction 3 years ago. She had been clean for a year before finding Mom through the DNA website. The discovery that her birth mother was wealthy and had raised another child successfully had triggered a relapse and her elaborate revenge plan. "She was in so much pain," Mum explained. "Not that it excuses what she did, but I understand it. The abandonment she felt, the rage." What happened next surprised everyone. Mum contacted her attorney and amended her will, creating a trust for Meredith that would provide for her education, housing, and medical needs, including addiction treatment, but couldn't be accessed for personal use until she completed rehabilitation and 5 years of sobriety. Mum also wrote a letter to the judge explaining the circumstances and requesting leniency. Due to Mum's intervention and Meredith's willingness to enter a treatment program, the judge sentenced her to probation and mandatory rehabilitation rather than prison time. The hospice agency fired her, of course, and her falsified nursing credentials ensured she would never work in healthcare again. The most surprising outcome, though, was the relationship that cautiously developed between Mom and Meredith. Under strict supervision, Meredith was allowed to visit Mom regularly as part of her therapy. Their conversations were difficult, painful, but increasingly honest. Mom shared stories of her youth, her brief relationship with Meredith's father, and her agonizing decision to give up her baby. Meredith gradually opened up about her troubled life and the roots of her addiction and anger. By some miracle, Mom lived 3 months beyond her prognosis, long enough to witness Meredith complete her initial treatment program and begin outpatient therapy. Their reconciliation was tentative and imperfect, but real. I remained wary but came to understand that this broken relationship needed healing as much as Mum's body needed peace. Mum passed away peacefully last month, with both her children at her bedside. Meredith and I aren't friends, I'm not sure we ever will be, but we've established a cautious respect. She continues her recovery program and occasionally sends me updates on her progress. The trust Mom established ensures she has support without enabling her destructive behaviors. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't found that photograph, if I hadn't installed the camera. Would Meredith have eventually confessed on her own? Would Mom have confronted her? Or would the overdosing have continued until it was too late for any reconciliation? I don't have answers to these questions, but I've come to believe that the truth, however painful, was necessary for everyone involved. Mom died with one fewer regret weighing on her soul. Meredith received the acknowledgement and support she had craved her entire life, even if it came in circumstances no one could have predicted. And I gained a complicated connection to a past I never knew existed. Family secrets have a way of surfacing, one way or another. In our case, it took a terminal diagnosis, a vengeful plot, and remarkable forgiveness to finally bring the whole truth to light. Family reunions can be complicated, but nothing compares to the public humiliation one man orchestrated at what should have been the happiest day of his brother's life. My brother Mike and I grew up in a small Midwest town where military service was deeply respected. Our grandfather served in Korea, our uncle in Vietnam. I followed family tradition and enlisted in the army after high school, eventually completing 2 tours in Afghanistan with the 10th Mountain Division. I was proud of my service, but I never made it my entire identity. Mike took a different path. He enrolled in community college, dropped out after a semester, then bounced between retail jobs. Our parents tried not to compare us, but the contrast was obvious in family gatherings. Whenever relatives asked about my military experiences, Mike would grow quiet and resentful. Around the time I finished my 2nd tour and was considering whether to re-enlist, Mike announced to our family that he'd enlisted in the army. I was genuinely happy for him. Maybe this would give him the purpose and direction he seemed to lack. 6 weeks later, he called home saying boot camp was going great. Then the call stopped. 3 months passed with minimal contact, just brief texts telling our parents he was on assignment and couldn't talk. When I asked which unit he was assigned to after basic, his answers were vague, classified information, or can't say for security reasons. I found it odd but didn't press the issue. The military is full of people who exaggerate their roles, and if my brother needed to feel important, I wasn't going to burst his bubble. Maybe he'd washed out and was too embarrassed to admit it. I decided to let him save face. Fast forward 2 years. I'd completed my service and returned home to use my GI Bill for college. At a family barbecue, I overheard Mike telling our cousins about his classified missions with special forces in Syria. According to him, he'd been involved in high-risk extractions, close-quarters combat, and even a dramatic helicopter rescue that sounded suspiciously like a scene from a popular war movie. We lost 2 men that day, he concluded solemnly, accepting a reverent handshake from our uncle. Can't talk about it much, but it stays with you. I nearly choked on my beer. Special forces? My brother, who couldn't complete a 5K charity run without stopping 3 times, who needed me to kill spiders for him well into his teens. It seemed absurd, but everyone was nodding along, completely convinced. Later, when we were alone, I confronted him. Mike, what unit did you say you were with in Syria? Can't get into specifics, he replied, eyes shifting away from mine. Operational security. Right, OPSEC. But you know I'm a veteran too, right? I know how units are structured, how deployments work. Some of what you're describing doesn't add up. His face hardened. Look, just because you were regular army doesn't mean you know anything about special operations. Some of us worked on a different level. I let it drop. Maybe he'd attached to a support unit for special operations and was embellishing. Stolen valor is unfortunately common, but it's usually strangers seeking free meals or discounts, not your own brother lying to your family. But over the next year, Mike's stories grew more elaborate and frequent. He'd wear military-style clothing with patches and insignia he wasn't entitled to. He joined veteran groups. Worst of all, he started using his alleged military background to advance his career, landing a management position at a defense contractor that actively recruited veterans. Then Mike met Jessica. She was smart, accomplished, and from a military family. Her father was a retired Army general, her brother a West Point graduate. Mike's special operations background seemed to be what sealed the deal for her. Within 6 months, they were engaged. At their engagement party, Jessica's father toasted Mike, saying how proud he was that his daughter had found a man who understands service and sacrifice. Mike shared a dramatic story about proposing to Jessica, while still dealing with flashbacks from his last mission. Everyone teared up. I felt sick. The situation had moved beyond embarrassing family fibs. Mike was building his relationship, his career, his entire identity on a foundation of lies. If I said nothing, I was complicit. If I exposed him, I'd destroy everything he'd built. There seemed to be no good options. The length some people will go to just to avoid admitting they're ordinary is genuinely baffling. Imagine fabricating an entire military career rather than just finding something real to be proud of. The dedication to the lie almost takes more effort than actually enlisting would have. After weeks of internal debate, I decided I needed to know the truth for certain before taking any action. I filed a Freedom of Information Act request for Mike's military records, something anyone can do for basic service verification. The response arrived a month later. Michael James Reynolds had indeed enlisted in the United States Army. He completed 4 weeks of basic combat training at Fort Jackson before receiving an entry-level separation, an administrative discharge given to those who don't complete basic training. The reason listed was failure to adapt to military life. No deployments, no special operations, no Syria. He hadn't even completed boot camp. I sat with this information for days, unsure what to do. Jessica and Mike had set their wedding date, a lavish ceremony just 6 months away. Her father was arranging for an honor guard. Mike had asked several veterans from his support group to attend in dress uniforms. The deception had grown beyond anything I could have imagined. I tried approaching Mike privately first, showing him the records and urging him to come clean before the wedding. "Where did you get these?" he demanded, face flushing. "These are fake. Someone's trying to discredit me." "They're from the Department of the Army, Mike. Official records. This has gone too far. You're marrying into a military family under false pretenses." "You've always been jealous," he hissed. "You couldn't stand that I might have done something more significant than you. Jessica and her family believe in me. My employer values me. Who are you to take that away?" "I'm your brother," I said, "and I'm an actual veteran who doesn't want to see you disgrace what that means. Tell the truth, or I will." He stormed out. The next day, my parents called furious. Mike had told them I was trying to sabotage his wedding out of jealousy. He'd shown them fabricated records of his own, with classified sections conveniently blacked out. They believed him. "Why would he lie about something like this?" my mother asked tearfully. "Because he's been lying so long he believes it himself," I replied. The weeks before the wedding were tense. I made one last attempt to convince Mike to come clean, offering to support him through the fallout. He responded by uninviting me from the wedding. I sent Jessica a message expressing my concerns, but she dismissed them as family drama and suggested I seek help for my obvious PTSD and jealousy issues. 3 days before the wedding, Mike unexpectedly reached out. He wanted to reconcile. He asked me not only to attend the wedding but to give a toast as his brother and fellow veteran. It seemed he'd realized having me absent would raise questions. I reluctantly agreed, hoping he might have had a change of heart. I should have known better. At the rehearsal dinner, Mike was in full performance mode, charming Jessica's military relatives with stories of his non-existent combat experiences. Her father presented him with a shadow box containing his own bronze star, saying he was proud to have Mike join the family tradition of service. Jessica's brother invited Mike to speak at his ROTC commissioning ceremony. Each lie built upon the previous one, a house of cards growing ever taller and more precarious. Then came the breaking point. During the dinner, the DJ announced a special tribute to our military hero, the groom. A slideshow began playing, featuring photos of real soldiers in combat, photos Mike had appropriated from news articles and veteran websites, with his face poorly photoshopped onto some of them. The final slide showed Mike in a complete Special Forces uniform, with decorations including a silver star and Purple Heart. Jessica's father, the general, raised his glass. To Mike, whose classified missions may never be fully known, but whose courage will never be forgotten. I couldn't take it anymore. This wasn't just stolen valor, it was a mockery of every service member who had actually faced combat, who had actually sacrificed, including me, including Jessica's father and brother. This charade had to end. The wedding day arrived, a perfect June afternoon. The ceremony was military-inspired, with saber archers and officers in dress uniforms. Mike wore a rented formal uniform with medals he hadn't earned. Jessica beamed, believing she was marrying a hero. At the reception, the moment for toasts arrived. As Mike's brother, I was called up first. My hands shook as I approached the microphone. I'd prepared 2 speeches, one vague and inoffensive and one with the truth. Until that moment, I hadn't been sure which I would deliver. I've known Mike his entire life, I began, and like many siblings, we've had our differences, but we've always shared a commitment to truth and integrity, values our parents instilled in us. Mike's smile faltered slightly. He knew what was coming, which is why this is so difficult. I pulled the FOA documents from my jacket. Many of you are here because you respect Mike's military service, his combat deployments, his special operations background. I respect those things too. That's why I can't stand by while the real sacrifice of real veterans is cheapened by lies. The room went completely silent. My brother never served in Syria. He never joined special forces. He never completed basic training. I held up the papers. These are his official military records, available to anyone through the Freedom of Information Act. Michael Reynolds received an entry-level separation after 4 weeks of basic training for failure to adapt to military life. I looked directly at Jessica. He has built his relationship with you on a lie. He has built his career on a lie. I'm sorry to do this today of all days, but the truth matters. The aftermath was exactly as chaotic as you'd expect. Jessica's father, the retired general, demanded to see the documents. Her brother, in his dress uniform, looked ready to physically attack Mike. Jessica herself stood frozen, champagne glass still in hand, as the enormity of the deception washed over her. Mike initially tried to maintain the lie, claiming the documents were fake, that his real record was classified. But as Jessica's military relatives began asking specific questions that any genuine veteran would be able to answer, his facade crumbled. He eventually stormed out of his own wedding reception, leaving his bewildered bride in a room full of shocked guests. The level of self-destruction here is almost impressive in a twisted way. Imagine ruining your entire life over a lie you could have easily avoided by just not lying about military service. It's like watching someone set fire to their own house to avoid vacuuming. The fallout was extensive. Jessica postponed the marriage indefinitely, needing time to process the betrayal. Mike's employer, the defense contractor that had hired him partially based on his veteran status, terminated him after a brief investigation confirmed my claims. The veteran groups he'd joined publicly disavowed him. Our parents were divided. Dad, who had served briefly himself, was deeply ashamed of Mike's deception. Mum was angry at me for the public exposure, feeling I could have found a better way to handle it. Extended family members took sides, creating rifts that persisted for months. I received both support and condemnation. Fellow veterans thanked me for standing up against stolen valor. Others criticized my timing and method, suggesting a private resolution would have been more compassionate. I questioned my choice many times in the following weeks. Mike disappeared for almost a month after the wedding disaster. No calls, no texts. Our parents were frantic. He finally surfaced at a cousin's apartment 2 states away, unemployed and deeply depressed. The elaborate fantasy world he'd constructed had completely collapsed, leaving him to face the harsh reality of his deception. Surprisingly, it was Jessica who eventually extended an olive branch. 6 months after the wedding, she contacted Mike and suggested he seek professional help. She couldn't forgive the deception, she told him, but she didn't want his life destroyed by it either. With Jessica's encouragement and our parents' support, Mike entered therapy. The psychologist helped him understand the underlying insecurities that had driven his elaborate lies, always feeling inadequate compared to me, craving the respect that veterans receive, wanting to be seen as exceptional rather than ordinary. Over the next year, Mike slowly rebuilt his life on more honest foundations. He found a new job that didn't rely on his fictional military background. He made formal apologies to the veteran groups he had deceived and performed community service at the local VA hospital. He even developed a presentation for high schools about the harm of stolen valor and the importance of honoring authentic service. Jessica and Mike cautiously reconnected, beginning with coffee meetings that evolved into occasional dates. She made it clear that trust would have to be rebuilt from the ground up. Their relationship today is complicated but genuine in a way it never was before. As for Mike and me, we're working on our relationship too. The wedding incident created a rift that won't be easily healed, but we're trying. He understands now why I did what I did, even if he wishes I had found a less public way to expose the truth. I understand better the insecurities that drove him to create his fictional heroic persona. Last Veterans Day, Mike attended a ceremony with me, not as a veteran himself, but as a supportive brother of one. It was a small step, but a significant one. The path to redemption is rarely straight or easy, but at least now he's walking a real path, rather than a fictional one. If there's a lesson in all this, it might be that the truth eventually surfaces, no matter how elaborate the deception, and when it does, it's better to be the flawed, authentic version of yourself than a perfect fraud. Think that family drama was intense? Imagine discovering that your child's trusted therapist was actually manipulating them against you. Parenting a teenager is challenging under the best circumstances, but when your child is struggling with mental health issues, the difficulty multiplies tenfold. My daughter Lily had always been a bright, sociable kid until she hit 14. Suddenly, the cheerful girl who loved soccer and had a tight group of friends became withdrawn and anxious. Her grades started slipping, she quit the soccer team, and she began spending most of her time alone in her room. I'm a single dad. Lily's mom passed away from breast cancer when Lily was 9. We've always been close, working through our grief together. I've built my schedule around being present for her, even taking a lower-paying position at work that allowed me to be home when she returned from school. So when this dramatic change happened, I was desperate to help her. After several tearful nights and a particularly concerning panic attack, I took Lily to our family doctor. She recommended a therapist who specialized in adolescent anxiety, Dr. Vanessa Mitchell. Dr. Mitchell had impressive credentials, a warm manner, and immediate availability. She seemed like the answer to our prayers. The first few sessions appeared to go well. Lily would emerge looking a bit lighter, and she'd share small insights from her therapy, breathing techniques for anxiety, journaling exercises to process her feelings. Dr. Mitchell sent me brief professional updates about general strategies they were working on, while appropriately maintaining Lily's confidentiality about session details. "I think this is really helping, Dad," Lily told me after her 4th session. It was the first time she'd voluntarily spoken to me in weeks, and I nearly cried from relief. Around the 2-month mark, however, something began to shift. Lily became increasingly secretive about her sessions. When I'd ask how therapy went, instead of the neutral or positive responses I'd grown accustomed to, she'd mutter, "Fine," and immediately retreat to her room. She started making odd comments about our home life. "Dr. Mitchell says most parents check in with their kids several times a day," she mentioned one evening. She was surprised when I told her, "You're often working in your home office until dinner." I explained that I was always available if she needed me, but I also trusted her to manage her after-school time. This had never been an issue before. In fact, Lily had previously appreciated being treated like an adult. Now it seemed like a point of contention. Other comments followed. Apparently, according to Dr. Mitchell, normal families ate breakfast together every morning. Difficult with Lily's zero-period class that started at 7:15 a.m. Good parents checked their children's homework nightly, even at 14. Attentive fathers knew all their daughters' friends' names and phone numbers. Each comment left me feeling increasingly inadequate, but I tried to take them as constructive feedback. Maybe I had become complacent. I started making more deliberate efforts, preparing breakfast to go for Lily, offering help with homework, asking more questions about her social life. Rather than appreciating these efforts, Lily seemed annoyed by them. "I don't need you hovering over me now," she snapped when I asked about a science project. Where was this interest when I was struggling last month? I attempted to schedule a parent consultation with Dr. Mitchell to discuss these concerns, but she repeatedly deferred, citing her packed schedule and the importance of maintaining Lily's therapeutic safe space. "Adolescents need complete confidentiality to feel secure in therapy," she explained in an email. "Parental involvement at this stage could undermine our progress." This didn't align with my understanding of adolescent therapy, where some level of parent consultation was standard, but I deferred to her expertise. The last thing I wanted was to interfere with Lily's treatment. Then came the call that turned our world upside down. It was Lily's school counselor asking if I could come in for an urgent meeting. When I arrived, I found not only the counselor, but also the principal and a representative from Child Protective Services. "Mr. Bennett, we need to discuss some concerning allegations that Lily has made," the counselor began, her expression grave. "She has reported instances of neglect in your home." The CPS worker explained that Lily had told her therapist about being routinely left alone for days, having insufficient food in the house, and being ignored when expressing suicidal thoughts. The therapist had filed a mandatory report, and now CPS was investigating. I was stunned. None of this was remotely true. I'd never left Lily alone overnight, let alone for days. Our refrigerator and pantry were always stocked. Lily was actually a picky eater who often complained about my boring grocery choices. And most alarmingly, she had never expressed suicidal ideation to me. I would have immediately sought crisis intervention if she had. There must be some misunderstanding, I insisted, my voice shaking. These claims simply aren't true. The officials exchanged glances that clearly communicated their skepticism. They'd heard denials before. I was just another parent caught in wrongdoing, attempting to save face. When I tried to speak with Lily that evening, she refused to discuss the allegations. Dr. Mitchell says I don't have to talk to you about this, she said flatly. She says it's not safe. Not safe? With me, her father, who had devoted his life to caring for her since her mother's death? The accusation cut deeper than I could have imagined. Talk about a nightmare scenario for any parent. Imagine having your own kid weaponized against you by someone they trust. It's like having your home security system reprogrammed to let in burglars while locking you in the basement. The following days were surreal. A CPS worker came to inspect our home, opening cupboards and refrigerator doors, examining Lily's bedroom, checking for smoke detectors and adequate heating. She interviewed Lily privately, then questioned me extensively about my parenting practices, work schedule, and mental health. I answered truthfully and completely, still believing this misunderstanding would be quickly resolved. But that wasn't even the worst part. 2 days later, I received a letter informing me that the investigation had been escalated. Lily had allegedly provided additional details about emotional neglect and psychological harm. The CPS worker recommended that Lily continue seeing Dr. Mitchell twice weekly during the investigation, with all sessions now being covered by a victim services fund. I began researching Dr. Mitchell more thoroughly. Her credentials were legitimate: licensed clinical psychologist, specializing in adolescent trauma and anxiety. Her online reviews were mostly positive, though I noticed a few concerning outliers mentioning unprofessional boundaries and inserting herself too deeply into family dynamics. One review in particular stood out. Dr. Mitchell convinced my daughter that normal parental discipline was abuse. It took 2 years and another therapist to repair our relationship. The review had been posted about 8 months earlier, then removed. I only found it through a cached version. I called the family law attorney I'd retained as soon as the investigation opened. She was concerned but not alarmed yet. Unfortunately, this happens sometimes with well-meaning therapists who become overly identified with their adolescent clients, she explained. Teenagers often have complicated feelings toward parents, especially following a loss like your wife's death. Sometimes therapists can inadvertently reinforce negative interpretations rather than helping to contextualize them. But something felt off. This seemed more systematic than an inexperienced therapist making a misstep. I decided to hire a private investigator to look more deeply into Dr. Mitchell's practice history. Meanwhile, the CPS investigation continued. Lily's teachers were interviewed, our neighbors, even Lily's pediatrician. I cooperated fully while maintaining my innocence. The social worker assigned to our case seemed increasingly perplexed by the disconnect between the allegations and the evidence of our home life. Every person interviewed described me as a devoted, if imperfect, father. School records showed I had attended every parent-teacher conference, performance, and sports event. Lily's pediatrician confirmed she was healthy, properly cared for, and that I had always been proactive about her medical needs. 3 weeks into the investigation, I received a call from my PI. "You need to see what I've found," he said. "This goes way beyond your case." We met at a coffee shop where he laid out a disturbing pattern. Over the past 5 years, Dr. Mitchell had been involved in at least 7 similar cases where adolescents in her care had accused parents of neglect or emotional abuse. In each case, the accusations followed a similar template: claims that would be difficult to disprove, centered on emotional neglect rather than physical abuse, with increasingly detailed allegations emerging over time. In 5 of these cases, the children had been temporarily removed from their homes. Most disturbingly, Dr. Mitchell had eventually been granted guardianship of 2 teenage girls after their parents' rights were terminated, based largely on her testimony. Both girls had lived with her until turning 18. One now worked as an office assistant in her practice. "I think you're dealing with someone who has a savior complex," the PI explained. "She genuinely believes she's rescuing these kids. The problem is she's manufacturing the danger." That evening, while Lily was at a supervised study group, one of the temporary accommodations requested by CPS, I searched her room. I felt terrible invading her privacy, but I needed to understand what was happening. Hidden beneath her mattress, I found a journal. The entries from the past 2 months revealed a guided progression of realizations about my parenting, almost all of which aligned exactly with Dr. Mitchell's therapy approaches documented in other cases. One entry read, "Dr. M asked me today if I ever felt unsafe at home. I said no at first, but then she explained that emotional neglect is also unsafe. She asked if Dad ever ignores me or seems too busy for me, and I remembered all those times he's working in his office. When I told her, she seemed really concerned and said that's a form of abandonment. I never thought about it that way before." Another entry, dated just before the CPS report. "Dr. M says I need to be completely honest about what's happening at home, or she can't help me. She says many kids protect their parents out of fear or misplaced loyalty. Today she helped me see that Dad's busy work schedule is actually neglect. She says normal parents don't leave teenagers alone after school. When I mentioned Dad checks on me during his work breaks, she asked if that was really enough attention. Now I'm questioning everything." The journal entries showed a clear pattern of suggestion and reinforcement. Dr. Mitchell wasn't just misinterpreting Lily's experiences, she was actively reframing normal situations as neglect and coaching my daughter to view them as harmful. And here's where it gets absurd. At the bottom of several entries, Dr. Mitchell had actually written responses and suggestions, direct evidence she was reading and writing in my daughter's private journal. "Consider mentioning the time he forgot to attend your winter concert last year. And if they ask about meals, focus on how he doesn't sit with you while you eat," were among her notes. I photographed every page, hands shaking with a mixture of relief and fury. This was the evidence I needed, but I still needed more. The journal alone might be dismissed as Lily's subjective experience. I needed irrefutable proof of coaching. With my lawyer's guidance and approval from the CPS supervisor, who was now harboring serious doubts about the allegations, I set up a legal recording in our home during Lily's next therapy session, which was being conducted remotely due to a scheduling conflict. The recording captured exactly what I had suspected. Dr. Mitchell systematically led Lily through a series of leading questions, dismissed any positive comments about me, and repeatedly suggested interpretations that cast normal parenting in a sinister light. "So, your father checked your homework this week?" she asked at one point. "Yeah, he's been more interested lately," Lily replied. "Interesting timing, isn't it? Now that he's under investigation, he's suddenly interested in your schoolwork. That's actually a common manipulation tactic of neglectful parents, making superficial changes to appear caring when authorities are watching." By the end of the session, Dr. Mitchell was explicitly suggesting what Lily should tell the CPS worker at their next meeting. Remember, if they ask about suicidal thoughts, it's important to emphasize that you tried to talk to your father about feeling depressed, but he was too busy with work. That establishes a pattern of emotional neglect. I've seen some professional misconduct in my time, but coaching a child to fabricate suicidal ideation to strengthen a false neglect case, that's playing Russian roulette with someone's life using a fully loaded gun. The calculation behind this manipulation is truly chilling. Armed with the journal, recording, and my PI's research, I presented everything to CPS and filed a formal complaint with the State Licensing Board for Psychologists. The response was swift. The CPS investigation was closed with a finding of allegations unsubstantiated, and the licensing board opened an immediate investigation into Dr. E. Mitchell's practice. Within days, her license was temporarily suspended pending a full hearing. As news of the suspension became public, more families came forward with similar stories, at least 12 in total, spanning nearly a decade of practice. The hardest part was helping Lily understand what had happened. At first, she was angry and confused, unable to believe that the therapist she had trusted had manipulated her. We began seeing a family therapist specializing in reunification after alienation, who gently helped Lily recognize the manipulation techniques that had been used on her. "It wasn't your fault," I told her repeatedly. Dr. Mitchell abused her position of trust. She took advantage of your vulnerability and your desire to feel understood. Gradually, Lily began to see the pattern. Her journal became evidence not against me, but against Dr. Mitchell, as Lily recognized how her own thoughts had been systematically redirected and reframed. The new therapist helped her understand that the negative interpretation of my parenting had been planted, not discovered. I feel so stupid, she confessed one night, crying in my arms for the first time in months. You're not stupid, I assured her. You were manipulated by someone trained in psychological techniques who abused her power. That could happen to anyone. The healing process was slow and sometimes painful. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. But with proper therapy and a lot of honest conversations, our relationship gradually strengthened. In some ways, we emerged closer than before, having weathered this storm together. As for Dr. Mitchell, the consequences of her actions were significant. Her license was permanently revoked after the board's investigation uncovered evidence of similar manipulation in multiple cases. Several families, including ours, filed civil suits. The two young women she had obtained guardianship of were connected with legitimate support services and counseling to help them process the manipulation they had experienced. Most importantly, I worked with the other affected families to establish a support group and awareness campaign about therapeutic abuse and false allegations. We developed resources to help parents recognize warning signs of inappropriate therapeutic relationships and created a network for families navigating similar situations. Looking back, I realize how fortunate we were to uncover the truth before irreparable damage was done to our family. Some parents lost years with their children due to Dr. Mitchell's manipulation. Some relationships never fully recovered. Lily is 17 now, thriving in school and planning for college. She still sees a therapist occasionally, but we've established clear boundaries and open communication about her treatment. The experience has made her more discerning about authority figures and more aware of manipulation tactics. Painful lessons to learn so young, but valuable ones nonetheless. If there's one thing this experience taught us, is that even professionals we trust can sometimes cause harm, whether through misguided good intentions or more sinister motivations. Blind trust is dangerous. Healthy skepticism and involvement are essential, especially when it comes to your child's mental health care. And perhaps most importantly, we learn that the truth, no matter how buried or distorted, eventually finds its way to the surface. In our case, it arrived just in time. While some manipulation happens behind closed doors, sometimes the deception hides in plain sight, just like this grandmother's shocking performance. My grandmother Eleanor was always the sharpest person in any room. A former corporate attorney who retired at 65 with a substantial investment portfolio, she was the family matriarch who never missed a detail. She could recall birthdays, anniversaries, and childhood stories with perfect clarity well into her 80s. She managed her own finances, lived independently in her beautiful Victorian home, and still hosted elaborate Sunday dinners for the extended family every month. So when she started forgetting things at 84, we were concerned but not surprised. Aging comes for everyone eventually, even brilliant legal minds like my grandmother. It started small, misplaced keys, forgotten appointments, repeating stories she'd told just hours earlier. My father, her son, and my uncle Richard, her younger son, began discussing assisted living options. Mom's slipping, Dad would say with a sigh. Last week she couldn't remember who the current president is. Uncle Richard always seemed more alarmed. It's worse than you think, he'd insist. She called me by Dad's name yesterday and didn't even realize her mistake. The decline seemed to accelerate rapidly. During family gatherings, grandmother would appear disoriented, asking the same questions repeatedly, or staring blankly when addressed directly. At one Sunday dinner, she stood in the middle of her kitchen, where she'd cooked thousands of meals, and couldn't remember where she kept the silverware. The family decided something needed to be done. Uncle Richard, who lived closest to grandmother's home, suggested hiring a full-time caregiver. Dad thought assisted living made more sense. My cousins researched memory care facilities. Everyone had opinions about grandmother's future, except, it seemed, grandmother herself, who was deemed too confused to participate in these discussions. I had recently moved back to town after finishing graduate school and was between jobs, so I volunteered to check on her daily, while the family debated more permanent arrangements. Grandmother and I had always been close. I'd lived with her for a year during undergrad when my parents were going through their divorce. She'd taught me to play chess, helped me with calculus homework, and shared stories about her pioneering days as one of the few female attorneys in corporate law. My daily visits started as simple wellness checks. I'd bring groceries, make sure she was taking her medications, help with household tasks, and keep her company for a few hours. What I observed, however, didn't align with the rapidly progressing dementia my family had described. Alone with me, grandmother often seemed fine. Not perfect, she did occasionally forget a name or lose track of a conversation, but nothing like the severely confused woman my father and uncle described. She could discuss current events, recall detailed family history, and even beat me at chess more often than not. Most curiously, her symptoms seemed to fluctuate, depending on who was visiting. When my father came by, she would be forgetful but generally oriented. When Uncle Richard visited, she would become dramatically worse, sometimes unable to recognize family members or remember what year it was. It's common for dementia patients to have good days and bad days, Uncle Richard explained when I mentioned the inconsistency. And she's always been more comfortable around you. That's why she seems better when you're there. That explanation made sense, but something still felt off. I started paying closer attention to grandmother's medication, a new prescription for memory support that Uncle Richard had gotten from Mum's doctor. One morning, while emptying the bathroom trash, I noticed something odd. 7 pills at the bottom of the bin, still in their daily dispensary packets. A full week of medication, untaken. When I asked grandmother about it, she seemed genuinely confused. Richard brings those every week, but I'm not sure what they're for. My doctor prescribed something? I called her primary physician to verify the prescription. According to his records, he hadn't prescribed any memory medication and hadn't seen grandmother in nearly 6 months. He was surprised to hear about her rapid cognitive decline, as her last checkup had shown no significant memory issues beyond normal aging. Now seriously concerned, I began documenting grandmother's condition during my visits. She was consistently able to manage her daily routine, recall recent conversations, and engage with current events when we were alone. Yet according to family reports, she was increasingly helpless and confused when others visited. One afternoon, I arrived earlier than expected. Grandmother didn't hear me enter using my key, and I found her in her study speaking clearly and articulately on the phone. "Yes, that's correct," she was saying. "I want to adjust the distribution percentages. Richard's children will receive the larger portion now." She saw me and quickly ended the call. "Oh, Alex, you're early today." "Who was that, Grandma?" I asked. "Just handling some business," she said vaguely, and then, as if a switch had been flipped, she adopted a slightly confused expression. "What day is it again, dear?" The sudden transformation sent chills down my spine. Later that day, I checked her recent calls and discovered she'd been speaking with her estate attorney. The next suspicious incident occurred during one of Uncle Richard's visits. I was supposedly leaving, but doubled back to grab a forgotten jacket. From the hallway, I overheard their conversation. "You're doing great, Mum," Uncle Richard was saying. "Dr. Hoffman is coming next week for another evaluation. Remember to act just like we practiced." "I don't see why we need to continue this charade," Grandmother replied, sounding irritated and completely lucid. "The will changes are nearly complete." "Because Alex is getting suspicious," Richard hissed, "and we need the medical documentation in case anyone contests the changes. Just stick to the plan." I slipped out before they could discover me, my mind reeling. My grandmother wasn't suffering from dementia, she was faking it, and my uncle was not only aware but actively participating in the deception. The pure theatrical commitment here is almost impressive. Imagine maintaining a fake dementia performance for months just to cut people out of your will. There are literal Oscar nominees with less dedication to their craft than this grandmother. Later investigation revealed the likely motivation: money. My grandmother's estate was worth several $1,000,000, her home, investment portfolio, and substantial retirement savings. The original will divided everything equally among her children and grandchildren, with specific bequests to several charities she had supported throughout her life. If the will was being changed to favor Uncle Richard's family, the financial implications were significant. But that wasn't even the worst part. While reorganizing grandmother's desk at her request, I discovered notes in Uncle Richard's handwriting, a detailed schedule for when to take the dementia medication, which I now suspected was either a placebo or something causing temporary confusion, along with bullet points for behaviors to display during family visits and doctor appointments. A quick background check on Dr. Hoffman revealed he wasn't a geriatric specialist as Richard had claimed, but a general practitioner who had lost hospital privileges years ago for ethical violations. He was, however, a former college roommate of Uncle Richard's. I needed irrefutable evidence before confronting them. I purchased small, unobtrusive cameras and during my next visit, installed them in Grandmother's study and living room, the two places where most family conversations occurred. I made sure to position them legally, no bathrooms or bedrooms, and in areas where Grandmother had explicitly given me permission to help organize and clean. 2 days later, the cameras captured exactly what I had suspected. As soon as the house was empty of visitors, Grandmother's dementia completely vanished. She worked on complex Sudoku puzzles, read the Wall Street Journal, and made detailed notes on her investment portfolio, all activities impossible for someone with advanced cognitive impairment. Then came the damning evidence. Uncle Richard visited and the cameras recorded their entire conversation. He coached Grandmother on specific symptoms to display during an upcoming family dinner, reminded her which relatives she should not recognize, and went through a rehearsal of confused responses to common questions. "Remember to ask about Mom at least twice," he instructed. "It always upsets Alex when you forget your own daughter died 15 years ago." Grandmother nodded. "And I should keep forgetting Alex's name, calling him by his father's name instead?" "Exactly. And when we discuss the trust fund distribution, just stare blankly until I change the subject." They reviewed the latest draft of the new will together, a document that completely excluded me and my father while giving Uncle Richard control of the entire estate as Grandmother's caretaker, with most assets eventually transferring to his children. The most shocking moment came when they explicitly discussed me. "What if Alex suspects something?" Grandmother asked. Uncle Richard scoffed. "Who would believe him over a doctor's diagnosis? Besides, we've been laying the groundwork for months. Everyone already thinks you're slipping. If Alex makes accusations, he'll just look like he's in denial about his beloved grandmother's condition." Then came the breaking point. The cameras caught Grandmother signing the new will with Uncle Richard and a notary present. She was perfectly lucid, discussing specific legal terms with complete understanding. The notary, another friend of Richard's, never questioned her mental capacity, despite the supposed dementia diagnosis that Richard had been sharing with the family. After the notary left, Grandmother revealed her true feelings. "I'm tired of Alex always being the favorite. Your brother always thought his son was so special, so much smarter than your boys. This will fix that entitlement problem." "He won't get a penny," Richard agreed. "And once we have the guardianship established, we can sell the house and move those investments to more appropriate accounts." I'd seen enough. I downloaded all the footage and scheduled a family meeting, including Grandmother's longtime elder law attorney. Not the one she'd been speaking with recently, who turned out to be a friend of Richard's with questionable credentials. The day of the meeting, everyone gathered in Grandmother's living room. My father, Uncle Richard, my cousins, and Grandmother herself, who was putting on her now familiar confused act. I connected my laptop to the television and simply played the footage. The room fell silent as we watched Grandmother transform from a supposedly dementia-stricken, elderly woman to a sharp, calculating manipulator working with Uncle Richard to defraud the rest of the family. The scene where they specifically discussed excluding me and my father while Grandmother lucidly signed the new will was particularly damning. The fallout was immediate and severe. Uncle Richard attempted to claim the footage was somehow doctored, but fell silent when the elder law attorney confirmed that falsifying mental incapacity to change a will constituted fraud and potential elder abuse by both him and Grandmother. Grandmother's reaction was unexpected. Rather than continuing the charade, she became indignant. "It's my money," she snapped, completely lucid now. "I can do whatever I want with it." "Of course you can, Eleanor," her longtime attorney said calmly, "if you're mentally competent to make those decisions. But you can't have it both ways. Either you're competent to change your will, in which case the performance of dementia is fraudulent, or you do have dementia, in which case these new documents are invalid." The meeting ended with several decisions, The recently changed will was invalidated. Uncle Richard was banned from having contact with grandmother without supervision. Most significantly, given the attempted fraud and grandmother's willingness to participate in it, the court appointed a temporary professional guardian to oversee grandmother's affairs and evaluate her true mental state. The professional assessment found what I had suspected. Grandmother was experiencing some mild cognitive decline consistent with her age, but nothing close to the severe dementia she had been performing. The evaluator also noted concerning personality changes that sometimes precede actual dementia, particularly her newfound willingness to hurt family members and participate in deceptive schemes. Uncle Richard faced legal consequences for his role in the fraud attempt, eventually settling a civil case with my father and losing his position at his financial firm when the scandal became public. My cousins, who had been unaware of their father's scheme, were devastated and embarrassed. As for grandmother, the story took a sad turn. Within a year of the exposure, she did begin showing signs of actual cognitive decline. Whether from the stress of the situation or simple aging, we'll never know. The cruel irony wasn't lost on any of us. She had faked an illness that eventually became real. In her increasingly rare moments of clarity, she expressed regret, not for the scheme itself, but for being caught. "I just wanted to shake things up," she told me during one visit. "Your father always got everything he wanted. Richard was always second best." Grandmother now lives in an assisted living facility with genuine memory care services. The guardian remains in place, ensuring her considerable assets are protected and used for her care. The original will was reinstated, dividing her estate equally among all family members upon her eventual passing. I still visit her weekly, watching as fiction becomes reality in the cruelest way possible. Sometimes she recognizes me, sometimes she doesn't. The difference now is that it's not an act. I've often wondered what caused her to participate in such a scheme. Was it the beginning of cognitive issues that affected her judgment? Long-standing resentments that finally surfaced in her 80s? Or simply the manipulation of my uncle, taking advantage of a mother who had always favored her younger son? Whatever the reason, the experience taught me something important about family dynamics and aging. Sometimes the most significant threat to an elderly person's well-being isn't their declining health, but the people closest to them who see opportunity in that decline, real or invented. From family schemes to workplace nightmares, some betrayals happen where we spend most of our waking hours. Imagine training your replacement without even knowing it. I've been with Meridian Solutions for almost 7 years, steadily climbing from entry-level analyst to senior account manager. I handled our top 20 clients, generating over 40% of the company's annual revenue. My performance reviews were consistently excellent. I'd received modest but regular raises, and I genuinely enjoyed my colleagues. It wasn't perfect, but I thought I'd found my professional home. That changed when Alison Harper arrived. She was introduced as a process improvement consultant, hired to help streamline our client management systems. My boss, Kevin, assigned me to work closely with her. "You've developed the most comprehensive workflow," he explained. "If Alison can document your methods, we might be able to implement them across the department." It sounded reasonable, flattering even. I'd created several customized tracking spreadsheets and client management protocols that had significantly improved our efficiency. Why wouldn't the company want to expand those benefits? From day one, though, something felt off about Alison's consulting. She shadowed me constantly, taking meticulous notes on everything from my morning routine to how I handled difficult client calls. Her questions went far beyond process improvement. Who do you contact when the CRM system glitches? How did you convince the Westlake account to renew after their complaints last quarter? Which reports does Kevin expect weekly versus monthly? Can you walk me through exactly how you prepare for quarterly business reviews? She even wanted copies of my personal email templates and asked for introductions to my client contacts to better understand their expectations. I obliged, though increasingly reluctantly. "You're documenting an awful lot for a system improvement project," I remarked casually during her second week. "Thoroughness is my specialty," Alison replied with a tight smile. "I like to understand every aspect before making recommendations." I might have continued believing the cover story if not for what happened that Friday. I was returning from lunch when I passed the conference room, where Kevin was meeting with our regional director, Marcus. The door was partially open, and I clearly heard my name. Timeline for transition? When can we move Jennifer out? Marcus was asking. Allison needs another 2 weeks to fully document everything, Kevin replied. Then we'll schedule the HR conversation, probably first week of next month. And you're sure we can maintain the client relationships with just Allison? Jennifer's been here a long time. Allison's already connecting well with the key accounts. Plus, we're saving nearly 30% on the salary differential. The year-end bonus implications are significant. I froze outside the door, heart pounding. They were replacing me with Allison. I wasn't training a consultant. I was training my replacement. And apparently taking a 30% pay cut was preferable to giving me a raise. I forced myself to walk calmly back to my desk, where Allison was waiting with more questions about our major accounts. I smiled and continued the training session, as if I hadn't just heard my professional execution being scheduled. The sheer calculated coldness here is stunning. Imagine making someone dig their own professional grave while telling them it's just a garden renovation. The psychological manipulation would be impressive if it wasn't so completely sociopathic. That weekend was a blur of anxiety, anger, and frantic planning. By Monday morning, I had developed 3 critical objectives: confirm the replacement plan, protect myself, and find an escape route. Confirmation came easier than expected. While helping Allison navigate our shared drive that morning, I noticed a new folder labeled Department Restructuring. It shouldn't have been accessible to me, but someone had apparently forgotten to set proper permissions. Inside was an email thread where Kevin detailed the plan to Marcus and HR. Jennifer's salary has reached a concerning level for her position, especially considering upcoming budget constraints. Allison can handle the same client load at a significantly lower cost point. Once the knowledge transfer is complete, we'll proceed with the separation and transition all accounts to Allison before the Q4 push. There was even a transition timeline document with my termination date highlighted, exactly 4 weeks away. The document included talking points for my exit meeting, emphasizing that this was a strategic restructuring and not performance-related. Further digging revealed that Allison wasn't a consultant at all. Her LinkedIn profile, which she'd mysteriously updated over the weekend, now listed her as Incoming Senior Account Manager at Meridian Solutions, my exact title. That same day, I noticed other subtle shifts. Kevin stopped including me in strategy emails. I was removed from the upcoming quarterly planning meeting. My access to certain administrative systems was quietly restricted. The machinery of my professional execution was already in motion, and I was supposed to be obliviously helping it along. Then came the calendar invitation that confirmed everything. An HR meeting scheduled for exactly the date on the timeline, with Kevin, Marcus, and our HR director. The innocuous subject line read Team Structure Discussion, but the location said everything. It was booked in the small conference room affectionately known as the Departure Lounge, because it was only ever used for terminations. But that wasn't even the worst part. The most infuriating discovery was buried in another document. Allison would be taking over my client relationships, my processes, and my methodologies, but at a salary nearly 1/3 less than mine. After 7 years of dedication and consistently exceeding targets, my reward was being replaced by a cheaper version of myself. I could have confronted Kevin immediately, called out the deception, and gone out in a blaze of righteous indignation, but that wouldn't serve me well in the long run. Instead, I decided on a different approach, one that would secure my future while ensuring they'd remember the lesson. Phase 1. I updated my resume and began discreetly reaching out to competitors. Our industry is relatively small, and my track record was strong. Within days, I had 3 interviews scheduled. Phase 2. I meticulously documented everything valuable I'd created during my tenure: client relationship insights, troubleshooting protocols, revenue enhancement strategies, anything that wasn't explicitly company property, but rather my professional expertise. Phase 3. I began a subtle campaign of misinformation with Allison. I taught her processes that were unnecessarily complex, introduced redundant steps that seemed important, but actually wasted time, and emphasized all the wrong priorities for our key clients. The Davison account always needs extra attention on Thursdays, I'd say with complete seriousness. That's when their procurement team reviews orders, so any issues must be addressed by Wednesday. This was entirely fabricated. The Davison team finalized orders on Mondays, but Alison dutifully noted it down. Always send the analytics report to Johnson Manufacturing as a PDF. Never Excel, I instructed. Their IT system can't process our Excel formats. Another fiction. Johnson specifically requested Excel files for their internal systems, and sending PDFs would cause significant frustration. I taught her to use outdated templates, showed her unnecessarily complicated ways to generate reports, and subtly misrepresented client preferences. Nothing that would cause catastrophic problems. I wasn't looking to harm our clients, but enough to ensure a bumpy transition and demonstrate the value of my experience. Meanwhile, my job search was progressing rapidly. My second interview with Meridian's main competitor, Apex Consulting, had gone exceptionally well. They were particularly interested in my insights about the industry landscape, insights that naturally included detailed knowledge of Meridian's client base and service gaps. By the third week of the charade, I received an offer from Apex, a 40% salary increase, better benefits, and a clear path to director level within 2 years. I accepted immediately but negotiated a start date 3 weeks out to provide adequate notice to my current employer. In reality, I wanted to time my departure for maximum impact. The universe delivered the perfect opportunity the following Monday. Kevin was out of the office and Alison was shadowing me for a client call with our largest account. Minutes before the call, she was pulled into an unexpected meeting with Marcus. Left alone, I noticed she'd forgotten to lock her computer. Her email was open, showing a message to a friend. First week officially on the payroll at Meridian. Still doing this weird shadow training with the woman I'm replacing. She has no idea she's being fired next week. Kind of awkward, but worth it for the promotion. Might even get her office. The call with our biggest client went smoothly, though I made sure to reference several complex account details that weren't documented anywhere, emphasizing my personal relationship with their team. When Alison returned, she asked what she'd missed. I provided a vague summary that omitted key points. Things went from bad to unhinged over the next few days. Kevin began introducing Alison to clients as a new team member, without explaining my status. HR sent a calendar invitation for my termination meeting, now just 4 days away. Alison started clearing space in a desk drawer near mine, occasionally glancing at my family photos with a measuring eye. The day before my scheduled termination, I arrived early, carrying a small box that gave the impression I might be expecting to pack up personal items. I went straight to Kevin's office and placed my resignation letter on his desk. The letter was professional but direct. Effective immediately, I was accepting a position with Apex Consulting as their new Director of Client Services. When Kevin arrived 30 minutes later, his face went through a fascinating series of expressions. Surprise at seeing me already there, confusion at the resignation letter, shock at the competitor's name, and finally panic as he realized the implications. "You can't just leave without notice," he sputtered. "What about your clients? What about the transition plan?" "Transition plan?" I asked innocently. "You mean the one where Alison takes over after you terminate me tomorrow at 2 p.m.? That transition plan?" The color drained from his face. "How did you—" "It doesn't matter," I interrupted. "What matters is that I've accepted another position. Today is my last day. I've already prepared an email to HR detailing my departure and copied you." Kevin tried several approaches, first anger, then bargaining, even attempting to suggest that I had misunderstood the situation. When none of these worked, he switched to threats. "Your contract has a non-compete clause. You can't work for Apex." "Actually," I replied, "I had my new employer's legal team review that. The clause specifically prevents me from soliciting Meridian's clients for 12 months after voluntary departure. It doesn't prevent me from working for a competitor. Besides, terminating me while having me train my replacement creates some interesting legal questions about good faith employment practices. I'm not sure I've ever seen someone's face match the actual color ashen before, but Kevin managed it perfectly in that moment. Corporate executives really think employees are just interchangeable parts with no agency or awareness. The shock when they realize we can actually see what they're doing is almost worth the betrayal. The exit interview with HR later that day was equally satisfying. When asked why I was leaving, I simply pulled out copies of the transition documents, the calendar invitation for my termination, and Alison's LinkedIn profile. The HR director's mortified expression suggested this wasn't how these plans usually unfolded. "I wasn't aware you had—" access to these materials, she stammered. Clearly, I replied, just as I wasn't supposed to be aware that I was training my own replacement for the past month. I've taken the liberty of forwarding these to my personal email as well, just in case there are any questions about the nature of my departure. I handed over my badge, cleared out my personal items, and walked out with my head held high. My final act was stopping by Allison's desk. Good luck with the Davison account on Thursdays, I said cheerfully. And remember, Johnson Manufacturing absolutely hates Excel files. The aftermath exceeded my expectations. Within 3 days, I began receiving texts from former colleagues. Allison was struggling badly with the client workload, using all the inefficient processes I taught her. The Davison account was already expressing frustration about missed deadlines. Johnson Manufacturing had apparently called Kevin directly to complain about receiving uneditable PDF files. By the end of her first week solo, 3 of my former clients had reached out to me directly at my new company, having heard through industry channels about my move to Apex. Though I was careful not to violate the non-solicitation clause, I certainly didn't discourage their interest in following me. 2 weeks later, Allison quit. The job was not as represented, according to a hasty LinkedIn update. The following month, Kevin was removed as department head after losing 5 major accounts in a single quarter. Meanwhile, I thrived at Apex. My salary increase allowed me to finally pay off my student loans. My new team was collaborative rather than competitive, and my experience at Meridian had taught me valuable lessons about corporate loyalty, namely, that it should always be conditional and verified. The irony isn't lost on me that by trying to save money by replacing me with a cheaper alternative, Meridian ultimately lost several of their most profitable accounts, 2 employees and a department head. The 30% they hoped to save on my salary likely cost them millions in lost revenue. I still see Kevin occasionally at industry events. He always makes a point of avoiding eye contact. I make a point of smiling directly at him. After all, in a roundabout way, he helped me advance my career more significantly than he ever did while I worked for him. Corporate betrayal can be devastating, but nothing compares to discovering your mentor has been stealing your intellectual achievements all along. I'd been working on my PhD in biomedical engineering at one of the top research universities in the country for nearly 3 years when the breakthrough happened. My focus area was non-invasive glucose monitoring, something that could potentially transform diabetes care by eliminating the need for painful finger pricks. The holy grail of diabetic technology, really. My mentor, Dr. Victor Harmon, was something of a legend in the field. He'd published extensively on biosensors and had several patents to his name. Having him as my doctoral advisor was considered a major achievement, and I'd worked tirelessly to earn a spot in his lab. His guidance had been invaluable as I narrowed down my research focus and developed my experimental methods. The breakthrough came after 18 months of frustrating failures. I'd been working with a combination of near-infrared spectroscopy and a novel nanoparticle coating that I theorized could increase sensitivity enough to detect glucose through the skin. Most researchers had abandoned this approach years ago due to calibration issues and poor reliability, but I had a different angle. I still remember the moment everything clicked. I was reviewing my latest failed experiment at 3 a.m., bleary-eyed and discouraged, when I noticed an unusual pattern in the data. The sensor wasn't failing because of signal-to-noise problems, as everyone assumed. It was because the glucose molecules were binding to the wrong sites on the nanoparticles. If I could modify the binding sites to be glucose-specific, I spent the next week developing a theoretical model, then another month running simulations. The results were incredibly promising. By redesigning the nanoparticle coating with a specific molecular structure, I could potentially achieve 95% accuracy in glucose readings through the skin, comparable to conventional blood tests. When I presented my preliminary findings to Dr. Harmon during our weekly meeting, his eyes widened. "This is remarkable," he said, examining my data. "If these simulations are accurate, you may have solved the problem that stumped researchers for decades." I beamed with pride. "I'd like to begin prototype development right away. We'll need to secure additional funding for the materials, but let's not get ahead of ourselves," he cautioned, tapping his pen on the table. "These are just simulations. We need more validation before we consider prototyping." "Of course," I agreed, though I was eager to move forward. "Send me your complete research notes and simulations. I'll review everything and we'll discuss next steps. This could be significant, but we need to be methodical. Over the next few months, Dr. Harmon became unusually involved in my project. He allocated additional lab resources, extended my access hours, and even assigned one of his research assistants, Mia, to help with experiments. His sudden investment seemed like a vote of confidence, and I was grateful for the support. As we validated my theory with increasingly promising results, I began discussing patent applications. Shouldn't we file a provisional patent soon? I asked during one of our meetings. The results are holding up consistently. Dr. Harmon waved dismissively. Patents are expensive and complicated. The university has a specific process, and filing prematurely could actually weaken our position. Let's complete the research first, then I'll help you navigate the patent process. His explanation made sense, especially coming from someone with multiple patents already. I trusted his guidance and focused on perfecting my prototype. 6 months later, we had a working device, a small patch that could be worn on the arm for continuous glucose monitoring without breaking the skin. Initial tests showed accuracy within the range needed for clinical use. It was everything I'd hoped for when I'd started my PhD journey. I scheduled an urgent meeting with Dr. Harmon to discuss next steps and begin the patent filing process. Strangely, he was suddenly unavailable, citing conferences and department obligations. Our meeting was postponed 3 times over 2 weeks. Meanwhile, I continued refining the device and documenting everything meticulously. Then came the university-wide email that changed everything. The Department of Biomedical Engineering is proud to announce a groundbreaking innovation by our distinguished faculty member, Dr. Victor Harmon. His newly developed non-invasive glucose monitoring system represents a paradigm shift in diabetes care. The university has already filed a patent application and is in discussions with several major medical device manufacturers. There was a photo of my prototype attached to the email. I stared at my screen in disbelief, reading and rereading the announcement. This couldn't be real. My hands shook as I pulled up the university's patent database and searched for new applications. There it was, a filing from 3 weeks ago with Dr. Harmon listed as the sole inventor. The abstract described my technology, my breakthrough, using suspiciously familiar language that I recognized from my own research notes. The betrayal was so complete, it felt almost surreal. This wasn't some minor credit dispute or academic squabble. This was theft of years of my work, my intellectual property, my future career, and it had been perpetrated by the very person who was supposed to guide and protect my academic development. The academic equivalent of having your kidney stolen by your own surgeon. This guy didn't just cross professional boundaries. He demolished them, set the rubble on fire, and danced around the ashes, singing, "I got away with it." The calculated nature of this betrayal is genuinely chilling. I rushed to the lab, hoping there was some explanation, some misunderstanding. When I arrived, I found my research area had been cleared out. My notebooks, prototypes, and even my personal items were gone. The lab assistant, Mia, was there, looking uncomfortable. "Where's all my stuff?" I demanded. Dr. Harmon had everything moved to his private research space, she said quietly. He said the project was entering a new phase. Did he mention that he filed a patent application listing himself as the sole inventor? For my technology? Her eyes widened. No, he didn't. But... She hesitated. But what? He's been having me transcribe your notes for months. He said it was for documentation purposes, but he's been storing everything on his private server. I thanked her for the information and headed straight for Dr. Harmon's office. His assistant informed me he was in a meeting with the dean and several pharmaceutical representatives. I waited outside the conference room for nearly 2 hours until the meeting ended. When Dr. Harmon emerged, surrounded by suits and smiles, he froze upon seeing me. "We need to talk," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. He quickly excused himself from the group and led me to a nearby empty classroom. "I was going to find you today," he began, his tone irritatingly paternal. "I'm sure you've seen the announcement. You stole my research," I said flatly. "You filed a patent for my technology and listed yourself as the sole inventor." "That's not entirely accurate," he replied, straightening his tie. "Yes, your work contributed to the final innovation, but the fundamental concept evolved from my previous research. What you created was a valuable iteration, but patent law recognizes the originator of the core concept. That's complete bullshit, I snapped. I developed the binding site modification theory. I designed the nanoparticle coating. I built and tested the prototype. This was my breakthrough, not an iteration of your work. I understand you're upset, he said with infuriating calmness. This is how academia works. Students contribute to their advisors' research trajectories. You'll be acknowledged in the papers, of course. This will still be excellent for your career. Acknowledged? It's my invention. Where are my research notes and prototypes? All lab materials belong to the university, he replied coolly, and as the principal investigator, I determine how they're used and stored. I left his office in a daze, my mind racing between rage, disbelief, and panic. Years of work, potentially worth millions in licensing fees, had just been stolen from me, and the thief was protected by his tenure, reputation, and the university's eagerness to announce a major innovation. But that wasn't even the worst part. When I returned to my campus apartment, I found that my personal laptop, which contained many of my early notes and simulations, was missing. Someone had broken in while I was confronting Dr. Harmon. The timing couldn't be coincidental. Campus security took a report, but I could tell they weren't taking it seriously. Just another grad student who probably misplaced their computer during finals week. I didn't bother telling them about the patent theft. Without evidence, I'd sound delusional. And suddenly the whole plan fell apart. In my anger, I'd forgotten something crucial: cloud backups. I religiously backed up everything to my personal cloud storage, a habit from my undergraduate days when a crashed hard drive nearly cost me a semester's work. Dr. Harmon might have my physical notes and prototypes, but he couldn't access my cloud account. That night, I downloaded every file related to my glucose monitoring research: original concept sketches, early simulations, experiment logs, prototype designs, and most importantly, time-stamped development notes that clearly showed the evolution of my ideas long before I ever discussed them with Dr. Harmon. I also reached out to Mia, the lab assistant. To my surprise, she agreed to meet me off campus. I've been uncomfortable with this situation for months, she confessed over coffee. The way Dr. Harmon took over your project didn't seem right. Would you be willing to provide a statement confirming what you witnessed? I asked. She hesitated before nodding. I've already started looking for positions at other labs. I've seen how Dr. Harmon operates now, and I don't want to be part of it. With Mia's help, I learned something even more disturbing. Mine wasn't the first project Dr. Harmon had appropriated. Over the past decade, he had systematically stolen research from at least 3 other PhD students. None had challenged him, likely fearing the career suicide of accusing a prominent professor of intellectual theft. He'd effectively built his reputation on the brilliant work of students who had trusted him. Armed with my cloud backups and Mia's testimony, I approached the university's Office of Research Integrity. The initial response was exactly what I'd feared: dismissive concern and bureaucratic deflection. These are serious allegations that would require substantial evidence, the administrator explained. Dr. Harmon is a distinguished faculty member with an impeccable record. I have the evidence, I insisted, opening my laptop. Time-stamped development logs, original simulations, and a witness willing to testify that Dr. Harmon systematically appropriated my research. Even if there is some confusion about the development timeline, resolving this internally would be best for all parties. A public dispute would reflect poorly on everyone involved, including you. Translation: they were more concerned about the university's reputation and potential legal liability than about intellectual theft. They were hoping I'd accept some minor acknowledgement and go away quietly. That's when I realized I needed to go nuclear. The next day, I bypassed the research office entirely and emailed a comprehensive evidence package to every member of the University Ethics Committee, the Board of Trustees, the student newspaper, and 3 professors from competing institutions who specialized in biomedical ethics. I included all my documentation, Mia's sworn statement, and evidence of the previous theft patterns. I understand academia has hierarchies and traditions, I wrote, but systematic intellectual theft violates every principle of academic integrity that this institution claims to uphold. I am prepared to pursue this matter through legal channels and media outlets if necessary. The university's response was swift but still attempted to contain the damage. They informed me that they were looking into the matter and requested my discretion during the investigation. I agreed to wait 48 hours before contacting outside media. During those 2 days, something unexpected happened. Two former students of Dr. Harmon contacted me, sharing their own stories of research theft. Neither had felt empowered to speak up alone, but seeing my evidence gave them courage. One even had documentation of a similar pattern, original research mysteriously becoming Dr. Harmon's breakthrough just before graduation. When we presented this collective evidence, the university had no choice but to take action. The ethics committee convened an emergency session and summoned both Dr. Harmon and me to present our cases. Dr. Harmon arrived with the university's general counsel, clearly expecting to intimidate me with legal firepower. Instead, he found himself facing not just my evidence, but testimonials from 3 former students and a growing file of research discrepancies spanning his entire career. These are disgruntled students who didn't receive the recognition they felt entitled to, he argued, his confident facade beginning to crack. In science, ideas build upon each other. My expertise shaped their raw concepts into viable innovations. The committee chair, a stern microbiologist with decades of experience, was unimpressed. Dr. Harmon, the documentation shows multiple instances where fully formed research concepts, independently developed by students, were subsequently claimed as your own work with minimal alteration. This pattern is deeply troubling. The investigation lasted 3 weeks. During that time, the patent application was placed on hold, and Dr. Wiley Harmon was temporarily relieved of his advisory duties. The story leaked to academic circles despite the university's attempts at containment, and several prominent journals began inquiring about the situation. Finally, the ethics committee released their findings. Dr. Harmon had committed serious violations of academic integrity and intellectual property policies. The patent application was withdrawn, and a new one would be filed listing me as the primary inventor. Dr. Harmon's tenure came under review, his research funding was frozen, and he was removed from all advisory positions. For his part, Dr. Harmon never admitted wrongdoing. In a department-wide email, he announced his resignation to pursue opportunities in the private sector, claiming the controversy stemmed from misunderstandings about the collaborative nature of scientific research. The university, eager to make amends and avoid a lawsuit, offered me a substantial research grant to complete my PhD and continue developing the glucose monitoring technology. They also implemented new policies to protect student researchers from intellectual theft. As for me, I learned a painful but valuable lesson about trust and vigilance in academia. My device eventually received proper patent protection with me as the named inventor, and I formed a startup to develop it commercially after graduation. Dr. Harmon, last I heard, he was working for a small biotech firm in another state. His reputation in academia was permanently damaged, his publication record scrutinized, and his previous patents under review. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just exposing the truth, it's watching as someone's carefully constructed facade crumbles under the weight of their own deception. In stealing my work, Dr. Harmon ultimately lost something far more valuable, the respect and legacy he'd spent decades building. Sometimes workplace deception is more about saving face than stealing credit, like this next story about a coworker who wasn't quite what she seemed. I've worked at Pinnacle Insurance for nearly 7 years, climbing my way up from claims processing to team supervisor. Our department handles disability claims, verifying that policyholders truly can't work and ensuring they receive their benefits promptly. It's rewarding work, helping people when they're most vulnerable. That's why Melissa's case bothers me so much, even now. Melissa joined our company 3 years ago as an account specialist. She was immediately likable, always organizing office celebrations, remembering everyone's birthdays, bringing homemade cookies to team meetings. Within 6 months, she'd become the unofficial social coordinator for our entire floor. Professionally, Melissa was adequate but not outstanding. She made frequent errors that others had to correct, missed deadlines regularly, and often called in sick on Fridays. Her performance reviews consistently rated her as meeting expectations, but never exceeding them. Still, her infectious personality made her a favorite among coworkers and management alike. About 18 months into her employment, Melissa didn't show up for work one Monday. Our manager received a call that afternoon. Melissa had allegedly suffered a severe back injury over the weekend while helping a friend move. She was in excruciating pain and had been prescribed bed rest and physical therapy. The next day, Melissa emailed medical documentation to HR, showing a diagnosis of lumbar disc herniation with nerve impingement. According to her doctor's note, she would need at least 6 weeks of recovery before potentially returning with significant restrictions. The timing was terrible. We were entering our busiest quarter, with policy renewals and annual audits creating mountains of additional work. Melissa's absence meant redistributing her entire workload among an already stretched team. "We'll just have to manage," our supervisor announced in the emergency team meeting. "Melissa's health comes first, and I expect everyone to step up until she returns." We did step up. I personally took on several of Melissa's most complex accounts, often staying late to ensure nothing fell through the cracks. Other team members did the same, working overtime without complaint because we genuinely felt bad about Melissa's situation. After the initial 6 weeks, Melissa's doctor extended her leave for another month, and then another. The medical updates described continued pain, limited mobility, and the need for aggressive conservative treatment before surgery could be considered. Each update painted a picture of someone barely able to perform basic daily functions. Around the 3-month mark, Melissa began calling team members regularly, providing tearful updates about her condition. According to these calls, she could barely get out of bed without assistance, couldn't sit for more than 15 minutes without excruciating pain, and had to lie flat for most of the day. "I tried to make a simple breakfast yesterday," she told me during one particularly emotional call, "and had to crawl back to bed halfway through because the pain was so intense. I don't know how I'm ever going to work again." During this period, Melissa was receiving full salary continuation through our company's generous short-term disability policy. As the months progressed, our HR department began preparing for her transition to long-term disability, which would provide 66% of her salary potentially until retirement age, given the permanent nature of her limitations. By month 4, Melissa had submitted paperwork requesting permanent accommodations for an eventual return to work. The list included a specialized ergonomic chair costing $1,200, a standing desk with electronic controls, reduced hours, the ability to lie down every hour for 15-minute rest periods, and permission to work from home 3 days a week. HR approved everything without question. A special workspace was created in anticipation of her return, and schedules were reorganized to account for her reduced hours while maintaining her full salary. Meanwhile, our team was drowning. We'd picked up the slack for 4 months, everyone working 50-plus-hour weeks with no additional compensation. Requests for temporary help were denied due to budget constraints. Ironically, the same budget that approved thousands of dollars in accommodations for Melissa. I don't normally consider myself resentful, but I'd be lying if I said it wasn't getting to me, especially when our supervisor announced that certain team incentives would be reduced because our overall productivity metrics had declined during Melissa's absence. The entire situation was developing a certain suffering Olympics quality that makes workplace disability situations so tricky. Everyone wants to be supportive of legitimately injured colleagues, but when resources are finite and workloads are ballooning, even the most compassionate people start questioning things. Then came the day that changed everything. I had recently joined a new gym closer to my apartment. It was one of those trendy CrossFit-style places with motivational quotes on the walls and group classes with militant-sounding names like Battle Ready and Warrior Zone. Not typically my scene, but they had a good new member special, and I needed to work off the stress from all those extra hours. I was finishing my workout late on a Wednesday evening when I heard a familiar laugh. Turning toward the weightlifting area, I froze in disbelief. There was Melissa, our supposedly bedridden, barely able to make breakfast Melissa, performing a perfect deadlift with what appeared to be at least 150 pounds on the bar. I ducked behind a row of treadmills and watched in stunned silence as she completed her set, high-fived her trainer, and added more weight to the bar. Her form was impeccable. There was no wincing, no hesitation, no sign whatsoever of the debilitating back injury that had kept her out of work for 4 months. The cognitive dissonance was so intense I actually wondered if Melissa had an identical twin. But no, this was definitely her, down to the distinctive flower tattoo on her shoulder and the custom-designed athletic shoes she'd once shown off at an office party. As I continued watching, Melissa proceeded to perform an advanced workout routine that would challenge even a completely healthy person. Box jumps, kettlebell swings, overhead presses, and finally another set of heavy deadlifts, the very exercise most likely to aggravate a legitimate back injury. The audacity is almost impressive. Imagine faking a debilitating back injury so thoroughly you convince your workplace to restructure around your absence, then casually deadlifting twice your body weight across town like you're training for the Olympics. That's not just fraud, it's performance art. I didn't confront her. Instead, I discreetly took out my phone and recorded about 2 minutes of her workout. I then left quickly before she could notice me, my mind racing with conflicting emotions. Anger at the deception, validation that my growing suspicions had been justified, and uncertainty about what to do next. That night, I did some investigating online. A quick social media search revealed something Melissa had apparently forgotten. While she had made her Instagram account private, she was tagged in numerous public posts by her gym and trainer. There she was, participating in a deadlift challenge, just 2 weeks after her supposed injury. Another post showed her hiking in a local state park, carrying a heavy-looking backpack. A fitness competition page featured her placing third in a regional bodybuilding event just 1 month prior, during the height of her debilitating pain period. But that wasn't even the worst part. The trainer who had been working with Melissa at the gym had posted several progress updates about her amazing comeback after a minor strain, and her dedication to not letting a small setback derail her competition goals. According to these posts, Melissa had experienced a minor back strain during training, but had recovered within 2 weeks and was stronger than ever. What happened next? Nobody saw it coming. I spent the night debating my ethical obligations. On one hand, exposing Melissa would likely result in serious consequences for her. On the other hand, her fraud was costing the company thousands of dollars, placing an unfair burden on her colleagues and taking resources away from people with legitimate disabilities. By morning, I had made my decision. I compiled all the evidence, my video, screenshots of social media posts with timestamps, the public competition results, and emailed everything to our HR director and the insurance carrier's fraud investigation unit. I included a detailed timeline contrasting Melissa's reported condition with her documented activities. The response was swift. Within hours, HR had forwarded everything to our legal department and the disability insurance carrier. The insurance company assigned a fraud investigator who contacted me that same afternoon for additional details. 3 days later, Melissa received a surprise request to attend an accommodation planning meeting at the office. Unknown to her, this meeting actually included representatives from HR, legal, and the insurance company's fraud division. They presented her with the evidence and gave her an opportunity to explain the discrepancies. According to my colleague who was present, Melissa's reaction progressed through predictable stages. First denial, that's not me in those videos. Then minimization, my condition fluctuates and those were just good days. Followed by anger, someone is obviously stalking me. And finally, when confronted with the overwhelming evidence including her trainer's public posts, tearful confession, the company's response was uncharacteristically decisive. Melissa was terminated immediately for fraud and violation of company ethics policies. The disability insurance carrier demanded repayment of all benefits paid, over $78,000 in total, and referred the case for potential criminal prosecution. When news of Melissa's termination circulated, reactions were mixed. Some colleagues felt I should have confronted her privately first, giving her a chance to come clean voluntarily. Others were furious about the extra work they'd shouldered while she was apparently pursuing her bodybuilding hobby. Things went from bad to unhinged when Melissa created a lengthy social media post claiming she was the victim of workplace discrimination and had been fired for trying to maintain physical fitness while managing a disability. She tagged our company and several employees, including me, though she didn't specifically identify who had reported her. Fortunately, her attempt at controlling the narrative backfired spectacularly when several people, including her own trainer, commented with corrections and additional details. The trainer, apparently concerned about potential professional repercussions, clarified that Melissa had only experienced a minor strain that resolved within days and had been training at full capacity for months while apparently on disability leave. The most significant positive outcome from this situation was increased support for our overworked department. Management, likely concerned about potential negative publicity around working conditions, finally approved hiring temporary staff to alleviate the backlog. They also implemented a special bonus for team members who had worked overtime during Melissa's fraudulent leave. As for Melissa, I heard through mutual connections that she eventually settled with the insurance company, agreeing to a repayment plan to avoid criminal charges. She moved to another state and, ironically, now works as a personal trainer specializing in injury recovery. Her Instagram profile still features inspirational quotes about overcoming adversity and living your truth. I sometimes wonder if I did the right thing, not because I exposed her fraud, that part I'm confident about, but because I didn't confront her directly first. Perhaps she would have voluntarily returned to work if given the chance to avoid the more serious consequences. But then I remember those months of listening to her tearful phone calls about being unable to make breakfast while watching my co-workers burn out covering for her, and my sympathy diminishes considerably. The experience taught me something valuable about workplace ethics. While compassion for colleagues facing health challenges is important, blind acceptance without appropriate verification can harm everyone, including those with legitimate disabilities who may face increased scrutiny because of cases like Melissa's. Our department now has a healthier perspective on accommodation requests. We still approve them readily for legitimate needs, but with proper documentation and periodic follow-up. And I've become much more proactive about requesting resources when workloads become unsustainable, rather than silently picking up the slack until resentment builds. Sometimes the truth comes with uncomfortable consequences, but allowing deception to continue ultimately costs more than just money. It damages the trust and support that make a workplace function. Workplace drama can be intense, but relationship betrayals cut even deeper. Imagine discovering your employee manufactured a complete harassment fantasy. I'd been the director of marketing for 5 years at TechVision, a mid-sized software company with about 200 employees. My team of 12 was tight-knit and productive, consistently exceeding our targets and maintaining an excellent workplace culture. When our junior marketing coordinator left for graduate school, we posted the position and began interviewing candidates. Rebecca Wilson stood out immediately. Her portfolio was impressive, her interview responses thoughtful, and her enthusiasm infectious. She had 2 years of experience at a smaller firm and was clearly eager to grow her career at a larger company. After checking her references, all glowing, we extended an offer, which she accepted enthusiastically. The first 3 months with Rebecca were everything I could have hoped for. She mastered our systems quickly, contributed creative ideas to campaigns, and integrated seamlessly with the team. I began assigning her more responsibility, including leading our social media strategy for a major product launch. Everyone agreed she was a rising star. "You really found a gem in Rebecca," my colleague Thomas from sales told me. "She's already improving coordination between our departments." I was thrilled with her progress and mentioned in our quarterly review that if she continued on this trajectory, she could be considered for a senior position when one opened up. She seemed pleased but not entirely satisfied with this timeline. "I appreciate that, Michael," she said, "but I'm hoping to advance more quickly. I believe I'm already performing at a senior level." I explained that while her work was excellent, our company typically required at least 2 years of proven performance before such promotions, plus budget approvals for salary increases. Rebecca seemed to accept this explanation, but looking back, this was when her demeanor subtly shifted. Over the next few weeks, Rebecca began requesting more one-on-one meetings to discuss strategy ideas or career development. Nothing unusual about that. I regularly mentored team members, but these meetings often veered into personal territory, with Rebecca asking about my family or suggesting after-work drinks to build our professional relationship. I kept things friendly but professional, redirecting conversations back to work matters. Then came the first complaint. HR Director Janine called me into her office with a concerned expression. "Michael, we've received a formal complaint from Rebecca about some concerning behavior," she began. "She claims you made inappropriate comments during your meeting last Tuesday." I was genuinely baffled. "What comments?" "She alleges you told her she should dress more provocatively to impress clients, and suggested her advancement might depend on how well she played the game with executives." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "Janine, I never said anything remotely like that. Our meeting was about the quarterly newsletter design. We didn't discuss her clothes or advancement at all." Janine nodded sympathetically but explained that they had to take all complaints seriously. We'll investigate thoroughly. In the meantime, please limit one-on-one interactions with Rebecca and copy HR on all communications. I agreed, stunned by the accusations. That evening, I reviewed my calendar and notes from the meeting in question, confirming we had only discussed work matters. I also realized our meeting had taken place in the glass-walled conference room, hardly the setting for inappropriate comments. When I shared this with HR the next day, they seemed relieved but explained they still needed to complete a formal investigation. Meanwhile, Rebecca remained professional in team settings but avoided direct interaction with me. 2 weeks later, just as the initial investigation was concluding, Rebecca filed a second complaint. This time, she claimed I had cornered her in the supply room and suggested she could earn a promotion through special favors. According to her complaint, this had happened the previous Thursday between 2 Tarkal and 2:30 p.m. This accusation was even more outrageous and fortunately easily disproven. On the day and time in question, I had been giving a presentation to our entire executive team, including the CEO and HR director. 20 people could verify my whereabouts. This doesn't make sense, Janine said when I pointed this out. Why would she make an allegation that's so easily disproven? Despite this inconsistency, company policy required thorough investigation of all claims. While HR confirmed my alibi, Rebecca filed a third complaint, alleging a pattern of subtle harassment, including suggestive emails and inappropriate glances during meetings. At this point, HR placed me on administrative leave while they expanded their investigation. I was devastated. While the company was handling things confidentially, whispers inevitably spread. Colleagues were awkward around me, and I could feel my reputation deteriorating despite years of exemplary conduct. During my leave, I learned from a sympathetic colleague that Rebecca had been telling team members she was essentially running the department now and had begun sitting at my desk during my absence. More alarmingly, she had apparently told senior management she would consider dropping her complaints as part of a settlement that included appropriate leadership restructuring, meaning my position. Watching someone systematically trying to destroy your career with completely fabricated allegations is like witnessing a house fire you can't put out. The calculated nature of this setup isn't just disturbing, it's sociopathic. Who looks at someone else's life work and thinks, I'll just take that, thanks, and then builds an elaborate framework of lies to make it happen? While on leave, I began gathering whatever evidence I could to defend myself. I requested security footage from the days of the alleged incidents. The supply room accusation was quickly disproven by both my executive meeting alibi and footage showing Rebecca entering and leaving the supply room alone during the time in question. For the first alleged incident, conference room footage confirmed our meeting was entirely professional, with body language and expressions contradicting any suggestion of inappropriate interactions. In fact, Rebecca could be seen smiling and taking notes throughout the meeting. I also reached out to trusted colleagues who had observed my interactions with Rebecca. 5 team members provided written statements describing my consistently professional behavior and mentioning that Rebecca had recently talked about fast-tracking to a director position and seemed frustrated by the standard promotion timeline. But that wasn't even the worst part. A former colleague who knew Rebecca from her previous company confidentially shared that she had made similar accusations against her former supervisor after being passed over for promotion. That case had been settled quietly, with Rebecca receiving a substantial severance package. Armed with mounting evidence of false accusations, I was preparing my formal response when something unexpected happened. A junior team member, Jamie, reached out to me privately with information that would blow the case wide open. I think you should see these, Jamie wrote in an email, attaching screenshots of text messages from Rebecca's phone. She left her phone unlocked at her desk during lunch, and these messages were open. I know it's not right to look at someone's private messages, but after seeing what they contained, I felt I had to say something. The text messages were between Rebecca and a friend named Allison. They detailed an explicit plan to take down me in order to create a vacancy in the director position. The messages spanned months, beginning shortly after her performance review, where I'd explained the typical promotion timeline. Phase 1 complete, one message read. Filed first harassment claim today. Michael looks totally blindsided. HR has to investigate even though there's no proof. Another message outlined her strategy. Doesn't matter if the claims stick, the investigation process itself damages his reputation. By the time I file the third complaint, management will see him as a liability. In response to her friend's concerns about evidence, Rebecca wrote, "That's the beauty of harassment claims. They're basically he said, she said. Company will always err on the side of caution. Worst case, I get a settlement to go away quietly. Best case, I get his job." There were even messages coaching friends to provide false witness statements. Just say you saw him put his hand on my shoulder and whisper something that made me uncomfortable. You don't have to be specific. The messages revealed a calculated, step-by-step plan to fabricate harassment claims with the explicit goal of either forcing the company to promote her or providing leverage for a financial settlement. She had researched harassment policies, settlement amounts, and even tracked my schedule to identify times when I would have viable alibis, deliberately making some claims easy to disprove so that HR would lower their guard for more ambiguous accusations. And here's where it gets absurd. Rebecca had created an actual spreadsheet tracking her progress toward getting my position, with columns for each complaint, the company's likely response, and her counter strategies. She'd even calculated the probability of success and potential settlement values based on similar cases she'd researched online. I immediately forwarded everything to our legal department and HR, explaining how Jamie had obtained the messages and requesting an urgent meeting. The company's response was swift. Their outside counsel conducted a forensic examination of the messages, confirming their authenticity through metadata. Rebecca was called into a meeting with HR, legal, and the CEO the following morning. When presented with the evidence, she initially tried to claim the messages were fabricated, or that her phone had been hacked. When this failed, she attempted to paint herself as the victim of workplace hostility. The company's lawyers shut down these deflections immediately. Within hours, Rebecca was terminated for falsifying harassment claims and violation of multiple company policies. Security escorted her from the building, while IT immediately revoked her access to all company systems. I returned to work the following day to a mixed reception, supportive messages from those who had believed in me, awkward apologies from those who had harbored doubts. The company issued a formal apology and provided compensation for the reputational damage I had suffered. They also implemented new policies requiring all one-on-one meetings to be documented and, where appropriate, recorded to protect both parties. In the aftermath, we learned more about Rebecca's history. She had indeed received settlements from 2 previous employers following similar accusations. Her professional references had been friends posing as former supervisors. Her entire career had been built on a foundation of threats, manipulation, and fraud. The experience fundamentally changed how I approach workplace relationships and documentation. I now keep meticulous records of all interactions, ensure meetings have witnesses when possible, and am much more cautious about mentoring relationships. It's unfortunate that one person's calculated deception created this level of distrust, but the alternative, losing my career to false accusations, is simply too high a risk. Rebecca, last I heard, had moved to another state and changed her name slightly. Rebecca Wilkinson now. Her LinkedIn profile describes her as an entrepreneur and consultant who overcame workplace adversity to build her own success. I sometimes wonder how many other careers she's attempted to destroy for her own advancement. The most troubling aspect wasn't the accusations themselves, but how effectively the system could be weaponized by someone with no moral constraints. False harassment claims don't just damage the accused, they undermine the credibility of legitimate victims whose voices should be heard and respected. If there's any silver lining, it's that our company now has better safeguards in place to protect everyone, both from harassment and from false accusations. And I've learned that while mentorship and professional development remain important values, appropriate boundaries and documentation are essential protections in today's workplace. Just when you think you know someone, life can surprise you with the truth. And speaking of surprising revelations, wait until you hear what happened at this bachelor party. When Jake proposed, I truly thought I'd found my happily ever after. We'd been together for 3 years after meeting through mutual friends at a charity event. He was charming, successful as a financial advisor, and seemed genuinely excited about building a future together. The diamond ring was stunning, exactly what I'd pointed out during a casual window shopping trip months earlier. I said yes without hesitation, and we immediately began planning what I thought would be my dream wedding. We settled on a spring ceremony at a beautiful vineyard with 150 guests and all the trimmings. My parents were thrilled and offered to cover most expenses as their gift to us. Jake's parents, who lived across the country, were equally supportive and flew in for our engagement party. That engagement party was the first time I noticed something odd. My cousin Megan, whom I'd always been close with, seemed unusually quiet and kept making excuses to leave early. When I asked if everything was okay, she mumbled something about being busy with work and slipped out before the cake cutting. I didn't think much of it at the time. People get busy, relationships drift apart. Still, I was disappointed that she didn't seem excited for me. Wedding planning consumed the next several months. Between venue visits, dress fittings, and arguments about whether a chocolate fountain was tacky or delightful, I maintained the latter. Jake and I barely had time to breathe. He was surprisingly involved for a groom, with definite opinions on everything from the invitations to the seating chart. The only aspect he seemed disinterested in was the financial paperwork. Odd for an accountant, I thought. "You handle it, babe," he'd say whenever I brought up wedding budgets or asked him to look over contracts. "I trust your judgment completely." About 4 months before the wedding, while gathering documents for our mortgage pre-approval on our future home, I came across a strange tax form in Jake's home office. It was from the previous year and clearly listed his filing status as married filing jointly. I stared at it, confused. It had to be a mistake. We weren't married yet, and Jake had never mentioned being married before. When I asked him about it that evening, he laughed it off. "Just a clerical error by my accountant," he explained smoothly. I checked the wrong box on the intake form, and he filed it that way. I had to submit an amendment later. His explanation made sense, and I had a million other wedding details to worry about, so I didn't press the issue. In retrospect, I should have noticed how quickly he changed the subject to his upcoming bachelor party. "The guys want to do Vegas," he said. "Just a weekend, nothing crazy." I wasn't thrilled about Vegas, but it seemed like a standard bachelor party destination. What struck me as strange was Jake's insistence that he needed to go with just the old crew, college friends I'd met only once or twice in our 3 years together. He was usually eager to blend our social circles, but suddenly these guys were his sacred brotherhood or something. "It's tradition," he insisted when I suggested including his work friends who I knew better. "Some things should stay the way they've always been." As the bachelor party weekend approached, Jake became increasingly secretive about the details. His phone would ding with notifications, and he'd angle it away from me to respond. When I asked innocent questions about their plans, he'd give vague answers about just hitting some clubs, maybe some poker. The night before he left for Vegas, I overheard him on the phone saying, "She doesn't suspect anything, everything's set." When he saw me standing in the doorway, he quickly ended the call, claiming he was discussing a surprise gift for me with his best man. I wanted to believe him, I really did. The level of commitment to maintaining a double life here is almost impressive. Imagine the mental gymnastics required to keep track of which wife knows what, which friends are in on the secret, and which family members you've sworn to secrecy. It's like he's running a bizarre relationship Ponzi scheme where eventually the lies would have to collapse under their own weight. Jake left for Vegas on Friday morning with a quick kiss and a promise to behave. I spent the weekend finalizing details with our florist and caterer, blissfully unaware that my entire world was about to implode. The first crack appeared Saturday night. Tara, the girlfriend of Jake's friend Chris, texted me a video from the bachelor party. "Thought you might want to see how your man is celebrating. Don't worry, just harmless fun," the message read. The video showed Jake, clearly drunk, receiving a toast from his best man Ryan. "To Jake," Ryan slurred, raising a glass, "who somehow convinced another beautiful woman to marry him. Here's hoping the second marriage is as much fun as the first one was brief." Everyone laughed uproariously while my stomach turned to ice. Second marriage? I watched the clip repeatedly, analyzing the reactions of Jake's friends. None seemed surprised by the reference. They were all in on whatever joke this was. I called Jake immediately. No answer. I texted him about the video. Read, but no response. Then another message arrived, this one from Chris himself, clearly meant for someone else. "Can't believe we're doing this again so soon after Mexico last year. Jake's a legend." Mexico last year? Jake had gone to Mexico with college buddies about 14 months earlier. He'd shown me photos of fishing trips and beach bars. There had been no mention of a wedding. Unable to sleep, I began digging through our shared cloud storage, looking for those Mexico photos again. Most were exactly as I remembered, Jake with friends on boats and beaches, but I noticed something odd in every group photo. Someone's face was cropped out or blurred. The editing was subtle but unmistakable once I started looking for it. Following a hunch, I searched Jake's email for Mexico plus wedding while he was safely in Vegas without his computer. Several results appeared, including a receipt from a resort in Cancun for a wedding package. The reservation was for Jake and someone named Megan. Megan. My cousin Megan. No, it couldn't be. I must have misunderstood. With shaking hands, I Googled the resort name plus wedding photographer Cancun and found their recommended vendor. The photographer's website featured a portfolio of recent weddings. I scrolled through months of happy couples until I froze on an image that knocked the breath from my lungs. There was Jake in a light linen suit, beaming at the camera with his arm around my cousin Megan in a simple white dress, both of them barefoot on a beach at sunset. The date on the photo gallery, exactly 14 months ago. But that wasn't even the worst part. As I scrolled through the photographer's images in horrified fascination, I saw familiar faces, Jake's college buddies, who were currently with him in Vegas, plus a few of Megan's friends, everyone smiling, celebrating, complicit in this massive deception. In one photo, they even did a group pose making a shh gesture, like it was all some hilarious secret. I sat in stunned silence for what felt like hours, trying to make sense of it all. My fiancé had secretly married my cousin a year before proposing to me. They had an entire wedding with friends as witnesses, and somehow, everyone had kept this from me while I planned my own wedding to the same man. Then came the breaking point. In my shocked state, I texted my aunt, Megan's mother, a screenshot of the wedding photo, asking if she knew about this. Her response was instant and devastating. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry you found out this way. We all thought it was just a wild weekend thing," they both regretted. Megan swore it was annulled and made us promise never to mention it. They all knew. My family knew. And no one had told me. I spent the rest of the weekend in a daze, gathering more evidence and trying to decide how to confront Jake. I confirmed that not only had the marriage not been annulled, but they were still legally married. The married filing jointly tax status suddenly made perfect, horrible sense. When Jake returned from Vegas Sunday night, I was sitting calmly at the kitchen table with printouts of the wedding photos spread before me. "How was Mexico?" I asked as he walked through the door. The color drained from his face as he saw the photos. To his credit, he didn't try to deny it. "I can explain," he began, setting down his bags. "Please do," I replied, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. "Start with how you married my cousin and then proposed to me while still being married to her." Jake collapsed into a chair, running his hands through his hair. "It wasn't supposed to be real," he insisted. "We were all in Cancun, got really drunk, and thought it would be funny to have a beach wedding. We didn't think it was legally binding. It was just a resort ceremony for tourists." "So you accidentally got legally married to my cousin," I said flatly, "and then accidentally stayed married for over a year while dating me, and then accidentally proposed to me without mentioning this small detail. We realized afterward it was actually legal, but we agreed to get it annulled right away," he continued desperately. "Megan was supposed to handle the paperwork. I thought it was taken care of months ago." I called Megan immediately and put her on speakerphone. After some initial stammering, her story emerged. Yes, the wedding had started as a drunken lark, but feelings had developed. They had discussed annulment but never actually filed the paperwork. Instead, they had been seeing each other secretly throughout my entire relationship with Jake. "It was just supposed to be casual at first," Megan explained, her voice small. "But then it became more, and we didn't know how to tell you without hurting you." "So your solution was for him to propose to me?" I was shouting now, my composure finally breaking. "He was going to break it off with you after the bachelor party," she admitted. "That's why they went to Vegas, to figure out how to tell you." The absurdity is next level. Imagine thinking, I accidentally married someone else, so clearly the solution is to get engaged to my girlfriend and plan an entire second wedding before breaking it off. This isn't just walking into a mess, it's diving headfirst into a dumpster fire while covered in gasoline. I spent the next few days in a hurricane of emotions: rage, humiliation, heartbreak, and eventually cold determination. I cancelled our wedding venue, photographer, florist, and caterer. Most were understanding given the circumstances, though we lost some deposits. When I went to Jake's apartment to return his key and collect my things, I discovered yet another betrayal. The prenuptial agreement he'd been drafting with his lawyer, which he'd told me was just a formality that would protect both of us equally, included specific clauses about prior marriages and relationships. It explicitly referenced all wives and had special provisions that would have severely limited my claims in the event of divorce. He'd been planning to marry me while legally wed to my cousin, with a prenup specifically designed to protect him from both of us. The family fallout was nuclear. Some relatives sided with me, appalled by the deception. Others incredibly suggested I was overreacting to what began as a harmless prank wedding. The Thanksgiving dinner table would be awkwardly divided for years to come. Meghan and Jake, now free to be publicly together, actually stayed in a relationship after the dust settled. They moved to another state, presumably where people didn't know their origin story. Last I heard, they were still together, though not exactly welcomed warmly at family gatherings. As for me, the non-refundable honeymoon tickets to Bali became my salvation. I decided to take the trip alone, a 2-week journey of healing and reflection. On the second day, while attempting to join a snorkeling excursion, I met Daniel, an underwater photographer documenting coral restoration projects. We spent the rest of the trip together, forming a friendship that eventually blossomed into something more after months of long-distance calls and visits. 3 years later, we're married with a baby on the way. Daniel knows the whole sordid story and jokes that he's grateful for Jake's monumental stupidity, as it led me halfway across the world to our chance meeting. Sometimes I still marvel at the sheer audacity of what Jake and Meghan attempted. Who gets married on a whim, stays married, carries on a secret affair, gets engaged to someone else, plans an entire second wedding, and expects it all to somehow work out? The levels of deception required are almost impressive in their complexity. The experience changed me, certainly. I'm more cautious now, more attentive to red flags, and much less willing to accept convenient explanations for inconsistencies. But I'm also more appreciative of genuine honesty and transparency. Daniel and I have a strict no-secrets policy that occasionally leads to uncomfortable conversations, but prevents the kind of festering deceptions that destroyed my previous relationship. In the strangest way, I'm almost grateful for what happened. Not for the betrayal itself, which was legitimately traumatic, but for the clean break it forced and the journey of self-discovery that followed. Had I married Jake, I would have eventually discovered the truth in a much messier, potentially more damaging way. Perhaps after children or intertwined finances made separation more difficult. Instead, I found myself on a beach in Bali, rebuilding my life on my own terms, and eventually finding a relationship based on mutual respect rather than elaborate deceptions. Sometimes the most painful endings lead to the most beautiful beginnings, just not in the way you ever could have imagined. And that concludes our journey through some truly unbelievable Reddit stories. If you've made it to the end, you deserve a medal for surviving all that drama. Remember that while these tales of betrayal and revenge might entertain us, they also remind us to appreciate the honest, supportive people in our own lives. Sleep well tonight, knowing your family drama probably isn't this extreme, and I'll be back next week with more incredible stories from the internet's front page. Before you go, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments which story shocked you the most. Sweet dreams, everyone, and remember, sometimes the best revenge is simply living well.